In one brutal night, everything went up in flames. And this wasn't just any guild brawl. Demonic cultivators stormed the residence and slaughtered everyone inside. A mocking voice cut through the darkness, and the attackers sized up how tough their last survivor really was. The masked sect leader strode to the front, like trouble had a name. He reminded himself that standing in front of him was just an ordinary merchant, Hui Yun, the guild's leader, not some legendary martial arts master. The killer stared at the little box by the man's feet and barked, "Just give me the key." The merchant's smile twisted into something crooked, like he was hiding a secret. He grinned like he had a fight in his teeth. As long as he kept that key in his hands, the sect members wouldn't dare lay a finger on him. The man urged him to rip the box open with brute force. But he made it crystal clear, if you open it like that, everything inside gets wiped out. The leader snapped on his hypnosis magic like a switch. The merchant's eyes immediately dulled, like a switch flipped to dark. His mouth started moving on its own, like someone else had grabbed the control. He spilled the secret right away. The hiding spot was tucked under the guildmaster's seat. The leader gave his men a sharp nod, and the whole squad snapped into action. An accomplice snatched the hidden item in a flash, and that instantly proved the rumors about demonic charms weren't just fear. They were real. The merchant didn't back down. He shot out a bold command and dared the enemies to open the chest. The leader studied the find so closely he could feel treachery hiding in the mechanism. The traitor kept pressing him, taunting the sectarians for their endless indecision. He nodded coldly, like there was no room for hesitation. The merchant couldn't forget the day the Martial Arts Alliance's leader handed him this cursed item. That special protection meant to stop break-ins turned out to be useless trash once magic started swinging. He turned the key and cursed under his breath at everyone who just dumped this mess on his head. The box snapped shut with a sharp, final click. Inside, a dazzling blue sphere blazed with light. The merchant went wide-eyed. Some demonic sect torched everything around them just to get their hands on a tiny pill. Behind him, the sword's blade snapped into motion, flashing like lightning. The leader snapped an order at him. Say goodbye to life. Their last try to buy them off crumbled. Those fanatics wouldn't budge for a single dime. A tense moment slammed into the scene. The merchant's face suddenly lit up with a sly grin. The killer shuddered, completely thrown off and utterly confused, swearing he wouldn't go down a loser. The merchant flicked the pill straight into his mouth with a sharp, no-nonsense toss. A brutal surge of power ripped through his body, crackling like lightning. He swore he'd pay back every single insult. The enemy went stone still, like the whole world just yanked the life out of him. With a scream of curses, the sectarian hurled himself into motion. With a single, crushing swing, he severed the merchant's head clean off. The severed head rocketed through the air, spinning like a nightmare. A furious scream tore through the air when the stolen relic was finally mentioned. Mokuion shut his eyes. A blinding white flash swallowed everything whole. He jolted up out of nowhere and screamed at the top of his lungs. Sweat poured as he feverishly checked his own neck. The head stayed put, but the memory still screamed that it was a mortal blow. The door swung open, and there he was, an angry man gripping a bamboo stick, looming right on the threshold. The stranger barked out a harsh accusation, calling the young man lazy to his face. The boy froze in total disbelief. Right in front of him loomed Chunhen, his mentor from the Wudang sect. Refusing to answer, the old man swung a stick and cracked him straight on the head. As his mentor barked for him to stand, the merchant's feverish mind finally snapped. He was staring at the truth. He'd been a Wudang disciple 30 years ago. Training memories, and the sting of his shameful exile came roaring back into his head. But Chunhen hadn't changed a single bit, like time itself snapped back and rewound him. Then something else hit him even harder, leaving him absolutely stunned. Hovering in midair, a semi-transparent menu unfurled like scrolls, each one packed with combat skills, and the exact price tag for every single one. The young man stared, completely hooked as the weird illusion seemed to swallow his mind. The mentor stormed off, completely missing the magical glow hanging there like a warning sign. The boy realized this was the one key to the whole mystery, and he leaned in to study the scroll with total focus. Like a real merchant, he wasted no time, turning every ounce of talent straight into square meters of land. He couldn't believe what his eyes were showing him. Paying only silver to buy divine foresight sounded completely insane, like there was no way that could ever be real. His eyes snapped to the bargain skill, agile step, and the beginner discount practically begged him to grab it. Huiyon leaned into the corridor, peering in on a teacher who looked dead set on being unhappy. With the warmest grin on his face, the boy asked, bold as ever, to borrow 3 coppers. A swollen vein bulged on the old man's face like it was about to burst. A dull thud-thud echoed from the yard, like something was getting battered right outside. Above the Udon school, the sky stayed blazing clear, with not a single cloud in sight. The young man sat on the training ground like he owned the silence, chewing on a blade of grass while everyone else stayed on edge. After a few days of fighting his own denial, he finally accepted it. He really had slipped back to the past. That demonic pill was the whole reason everything went up in flames. She defended her name like it was proof of destiny. She ripped his life 3 decades back, like the past itself got yanked into place. It's still a total mystery why the Alliance's leader hurled this treasure at him like it was meant for his hands only. Out of nowhere, it hit him. If he just didn't grab that box in the future, nobody would ever come hunting for him. He slammed the door on martial arts and threw himself headfirst into commerce, leaving that world behind for good. Endless prospects spun in their heads, leaving them breathless and dizzy. Knowing the future handed him the keys to the richest merchant in the entire world. Just as his dreams were taking off, another student crashed the moment and yanked him out of it. The boy grinned and reminded everyone about today's evaluation for the secular students. Huiyon's mind snapped back. This was Zhong Osu, the Wuhan Bank's heir, the kind of name that carried weight. Still braiding grass blades without a pause, he let out a heavy sigh and realized, no matter what he did, they still wouldn't turn into inner disciples. Their lessons felt like they were getting thrown into a street brawl, not practicing the graceful magic of Taiji. Chon Osu leaned in, eyes sparkling, and asked the young man all about the homemade flutes he was about to sell. Huiyon smirked and said the sect wasn't about faith. It was just a slick cover to rake in useful connections. And those strict inner courtyard ascetics would drop everything and lose their heads over a toy that simple. The banker's son lit up instantly, flashing his business talent with zero hesitation. Huiyon remembered how, in a past life, this kid rose into an all-powerful magnate. Back then, friendship had no time to bloom. But now, Chon Osu decided he'd try something big and went out to buy a flute. 3 copper coins clattered into his palm with a sharp jingle. With a prayer for a roaring payday, the first client swung the door shut and disappeared. With the money in hand, the young man snapped the mysterious scroll back into existence. He mentally sealed the deal, and the coins in his palm evaporated in a dazzling burst of magic light. The moment it was there, he snapped the skill right into place. But right when the reflections started to settle in, a child's cry ripped through from the courtyard. In a daring little inner courtyard, a cocky student snapped at the older boys, smugly judging their technique like he owned the place. The kid snapped into a fighting stance with pure, aggressive fury. She warned she'd snap their arms in 2. One of the secular students snapped with rage and surged forward. But the little one snapped into action and struck without hesitation. He snapped his hand in front of the elders and grabbed control in an instant. He was ready to punish him brutally for every ounce of weakness. Out of nowhere, Hui Yan exploded into the fight at breakneck speed. He clamped down on the kid's wrist with a hard grip. He stepped forward and introduced himself as a secular student. The young man didn't hesitate. He coldly cut off the strike at its peak. The boy snapped and demanded they let him out right now. But Kfiyonu shrugged off their whole conflict like it didn't even matter. The merchant's face suddenly twisted into a sly, calculating grin, with a predator's commercial grin. He dared the audacious kid to come take a look at his incredible goods. One bold step shattered the silence, and a quick question cut through the air. A young man hovered at the cliff's edge, staring in awe as the Udon sect's magnificent pavilions stretched out before him. This was the beating heart of the entire martial arts universe. He carelessly plucked a sweet melody on a plain blade of grass, acting like it was nothing, while the truth hit hard. He still wasn't good at all. Yeah, it'll do, he decided. Then he caught the local kids staring at him like he was some kind of legend. Timid little Mayan Guyan swallowed her nerves and cautiously asked if she could try. The second he stepped in, the other kids swarmed him with warnings. The young man smirked like he already knew the outcome and lifted the blade of grass higher. He blared that he'd hand out the sample for next to nothing, and the kids instantly lit up with happy excitement. 3 coppers, he grinned, flashing 2 fingers like it was the best deal in the world. The joy vanished from the kids' faces in a heartbeat. He blinked, utterly thrown off, not ready for that brutal, sour backlash. He shot a wink to calm everything down and dangled a special deal. Buy 5 and you get it. But the boy hung his head and admitted, with a heavy heart, that he had 0 money on him at all. Then another kid's eyes welled up. He begged them to delay it. Please, please. The young man threw his hands to his forehead, thinking, wait, where are the kids roaming the wilderness with swords even getting money from? He never had any plan to scam the kids. He was hunting for any sparks he could find, connections with the future geniuses hidden inside the sect. I'm just messing with you, and honestly, that's all it takes. He happily agreed to hand over 1 flute for free, and the boy's eyes lit up with pure disbelief. With a showy flick, he parted the blade of grass and strutted like a hero, claiming it was a huge honor to hand his gift to the inner students of Udon. The tiny one wrinkled his nose the second he smelled it. The boy snatched up the gift with a grin, and the young man froze, because in that moment, memories of his past life slammed back in. This kid would one day grow into the unbreakable sword, Teguk. That future Master Link promised something huge, pure, unstoppable power pouring in. Suddenly, a brutal clatter of steel crashed through the air. A blade flashed like lightning and sliced the grass right in front of him, splitting it clean in half. The young man flinched hard. Between him and the kids, a grown man stepped in with a sword yanked and ready to strike. A stranger erupted in fury, blasting him for stealing the student's attention with those flimsy little trinkets. He snapped his eyes over the attacker's clothes, and it hit him instantly. This was a mentor from the central pavilion. Not again, these monsters and their threats, shot through his head as the man towered over the terrified kids. Seeing the boy's tears spill out, he clenched his teeth and seethed. Why did everyone around him worship nothing but brute strength? He swaggered up and demanded to know if they'd banned music in Udon, too. And the man fired back with that old saying, like it was the only truth that mattered. His gaze darts around, searching like it's hunting for answers. The hand yanks the bowstring tight, like it's about to unleash something unstoppable. But doubt claws at his mind, whispering that the arrow might miss its mark. But the distance to the target won't budge, the young man snapped, cutting him off mid-sentence. A single blade of grass sliced down to the ground, and as it fell, he calmly insisted that kids already know exactly what matters most. The mentor only let out a contemptuous snort, like he couldn't stand the idea. At that exact moment, the man erupted, an enormous aura blasting out and wrapping him in crackling blue flames. His eyes hardened, cutting like steel. He leaned in with a threat in his voice and demanded, So you've got guts to mock the sect's rules, huh? A crushing, invisible force slammed into the young man's chest, and he fought with everything he had just to hold on, knowing no one would throw their life away over something that small. He clenched his fists so tight, his knuckles went pale. The young man burst with raw power and roared that he'd ignore the barking dogs. Then he surged forward anyway. A tiny smile flickered across the master's face. The man snapped into wild laughter, then threw him a loud compliment, praising the courage it took to face the inner energy head-on. The young man bowed in pure relief, but his body still shook, like that crushing pressure had nearly flipped him inside out. The master yanked out his wallet and decided to buy back every single flute straw for 75 coins. When the man brought up the promised discount, the young man snapped back, rude as ever, claiming the promotion was only for minors. He flashed a big, cheeky grin, daring the master to save face by not asking for kid discounts. He smirked at the nerve, slapped a receipt for 100 coins into his hands, and tossed the rest in as payment for the scare. The young man stared at the paper, grinning like he'd just hit the jackpot, thrilled by the surprising money he never saw coming. Just as the happy kids were puffing through their straws, the man suddenly cut in and demanded, "What's your name?" With a warm, welcoming smile, the master introduced himself as John Hua. That name hit like thunder. Infinite Immortal Sword, one of the 5 strongest blades in Udon. A legendary monster is prophesied to show up one day and join the 8 immortals. The young man choked down his saliva, hands shaking like he was about to crack any second. He dropped into a deep, respectful bow and muttered curses in his head because that long tongue just wouldn't behave. Chonhua calmly leaned in and asked, "So now you get it. Before what kind of person you crucified yourself?" Satisfied with the obedient answer, he lets out a calm breath and keeps moving. The masters spun around and shepherded the children away. The young man let out a shaky breath, like he just clawed his way out of the executioner's hands. He barely had a second to celebrate his luck before his vision suddenly went dark. A hulking bald man strode straight toward him. The stranger barged in and boomed, "I'm Sa-gon-hyun of the Shinro sect." The story didn't waste time. Right in front of him stood the ugliest disciple on earth, twisted and wicked even before his rebirth. The bald strong man narrowed his eyes with a sly grin and instantly knew the truth. Standing before him was the king of merchants' son. Mukhuion stayed cool and fired back that he was just the son of simple farmers. Then someone sneered, asking how he'd survive in a brutal world. The bald man smirked, looked down on him, and offered his friendship like it was a favor. He thrust out a broad palm. Huion flashed back. Before he ever snapped back in time, he finally understood how desperate that reach for the hand had been. Then it hit him. This was a 1-in-a-million shot. Then, bam, the exact same incident hits again. The courtyard snapped into a deathly silence. The fierce mentor stormed out to the disciples, clutching a confiscated sack like it was evidence of war. The bundle burst apart and scattered a stack of erotic magazines across the floor. The crowd instantly broke into whispers the moment they clocked Sa-gon-hyun's favorite read. Huion mentally smirked at the stingy bald man, then snapped to the crowd, asking, "Whose room did you find this in?" The mentor snapped his fingers straight at Huion, like he was calling him out on the spot. While everyone else was distracted, the magazine's real owner strolled beside them, whistling like nothing could touch him. The boy froze in shock, scrambled to explain himself, but the command came down hard. Be silent. The verdict hit like a hammer. Instant expulsion from the order. No mercy. His fist snapped shut with a gritty crunch as the truth of the setup hit him like a punch. As the memory snapped away, Huion rocketed forward and brutally swatted Sa-gon-hyun's reaching hand aside. He muttered that he'd been stuck surviving for ages, but now everything had flipped and nothing felt the same. A savage, threatening vein bulged hard on the opponent's bald head. Huion didn't hold back. He blasted him as a piece of shit. Smugly bragging about his father like that could somehow cover up where he came from. "Bald head," he snapped, flinging the words straight into his face. A heavy boot slammed forward with pure aggressive force. Sagon-hyun's words hovered above him, pressing down like a warning. He growled that the boy was probably sick of living already. Huion bared his teeth with zero fear and snapped, "So are you gonna fight or not?" He pushed for a fight right now, betting it would end both of them for good. The big guy snapped his gaze aside and backed off, swearing this wasn't the end. He shot her a fierce glare, then stormed off like that was the last word between them. Huion crossed his arms, frustration spiking hard because he'd been sure today was the day they'd finally kick him out of the sect. In his past life, he got kicked out after just 1 month, so he decided to move first and strike before the trouble hit. The boy strolled off like nothing could shake him, locked in thought about the test ahead. Then a voice snapped his name and pulled him back. A familiar face sprinted up to him, eyes wide, and blurted, "Tell me, if I end up facing that bald guy in the exam, what am I supposed to do?" Huion sprawled back with his hands behind his head and laughed, claiming he already knew who his next opponent would be. A wave of memory crashed in. Back then, Sagon-hyun's henchman caught him and beat him so brutally it still hurt to remember. History will slam right back into place, unless a wild new variable crashes the scene out of nowhere. Variable. The tournament night has finally arrived. 2 lay students slammed into each other in the arena, trading fierce blows like it was life or death. The mentor stared at the battles with a heavy heart, and then, right from behind him, someone spoke. It was Chonhua, the elder brother, who showed up to size up the newcomers. Watching Chonhua's clumsy struggle below, he couldn't help but admit he'd got 0 talent. Chonhua grinned and confessed that he secretly tinkers with the system's crucial adjustments. Suddenly, his eyes snapped to something that looked way too interesting to ignore. In the stands, Huion just sat there, calmly chewing on a blade of grass, looking so openly bored it was practically a dare. Chonhua flashed a sly grin and leaned in to pressure his mentor into reshuffling the participants for the next match. He groaned at first, then finally nodded and blared the start of the new fight for everyone to hear. First, they called Huion, and he inched downward. The silence shattered as the opponent's name tore through the air. Sagon-hyun. The bald giant was already planted in the arena, radiating pure menace like a living threat. Huion snapped his head around in pure confusion, completely thrown off by that sudden twist. He locked eyes with the smug Chonhua and instantly understood the whole move. They blasted the signal to begin, and the whole operation kicked off. Sagon-hyun cracked a savage grin, practically vibrating with bloodlust as he seized the perfect early shot at revenge. The massive brute shot forward and went straight for the attack. He unloaded a savage barrage of heavy punches on the boy. Huion just barely managed to slip out of the crushing, fast-moving attack. His fingers secretly crushed a tough little pouch inside his sleeve, loaded and ready before anything even started. With a ferocious lunge, he drove that pouch straight into the opponent's face. Chonhua and his mentor froze in stunned silence, eyes locked on the arena. The bald man howled in agony, clutching his bloodied nose like it was on fire. Huion bared a fierce grin and snapped into a fighting stance. Rage and pain clouding his eyes, Sagon-hyun lashed out with a wild swing, but the boy just slipped under his arm like it was nothing. Huion shot forward like a thrown blade. A brutal uppercut slammed into the giant's jaw, crushing everything in its path. Without giving him a single breath to recover, Huion drove another devastating hit straight into his torso. Right then, something snapped his focus like a shockwave. He was honestly stunned. The giant's body was way lighter than anyone expected. The boy snatched his arm. With a brutal shove, he slammed his opponent straight onto the ground. He loomed over the fallen enemy, and finally realized, yeah, he'd gotten a little too carried away. Sagon-hyun hoisted his bloodied face, his eyes burning with pure, violent hatred. A muffled curse spilled out of his shattered lips. The boy snapped his gaze back with pure defiance, and the attacker froze in total shock at that sudden move. Rage surged through the gray-haired master as he nearly boiled over, barking that dirty tricks had been used. A steady hand landed on his shoulder and slammed the brakes on his raging outburst. The long-haired man with that chilling stare told him, straight up, to keep watching. The boy went rigid, bracing for the next strike. The massive bald monk drove all his weight into a bone-crushing kick. The kid snapped out of the way in a blink, and that heavy boot slammed the stone floor with a brutal crash. The boy dropped to one knee with a quiet thud, like the ground swallowed his landing. Right then, a shadow crashed over him. His opponent didn't even let him breathe. A heavy boot slammed into the stone like thunder. Mook Kui-on kept his cool. Nothing could shake him. He swung back with a savage counterpunch that smashed right into the big guy's face. He stared at his own hand in total shock. This once fumbling technique he could barely learn now slipped into place like it was always meant for him. The bald one spat out blood, face twisted tight as pain tore through him. The real secret hid in the system window. This kid snagged the nimble step skill for just a few pennies. The monk exploded into a roar and hammer threw a non-stop barrage of punches at him. Yet the young man slipped right through the chaos, vanishing between every strike like a ghost. Not one single strike even landed. That's the kind of truth that hits you like a punch straight to the jaw. The bald one squealed like he just stepped on a live wire. Kui-on flashed a grin of pure satisfaction. Paying in money for power felt downright amazing. But time wasn't going to wait. He had to bolt faster, start making money, and still hear the opponent spitting curses at him. Suddenly, the big guy wiped blood off his lips, and the whole air around him felt like it turned heavy. White steam blasted from the monk's mouth. He was seconds away from unleashing internal energy. The enemy tore forward at breakneck speed. The boy threw himself in front and desperately smothered a brutal barrage of heavy hits. His feet skidded under the crushing pressure, and in the blink of an eye, the thought of certain defeat flashed across his mind. The big guy launched a brutal swing for the final strike. Wild animal fury blazed in the attacker's eyes. Kui-on bared his teeth and clenched down like he was holding back a storm. You can't win this battle using basic moves alone. Right then, a blue silhouette streaked between them. Long-haired examiner snapped his sheath up and slammed the deadly blow to a halt in one clean move. The man rose with chilling calm, snapping the sword into place like he meant business. His stare was ice-cold. Using inner energy to crush a beginner was a disgrace even the dark sects couldn't stand. The bald man weakly pleaded his case, grimly recalling how sand got thrown right into his eyes. The examiner didn't say a word. He just snipped down every argument in an instant. In the street fight, he swore he'd hand out brutal punishment to both of them. The boy bowed his head without a fight, accepting the attestation's completion like it was the final word. Chonhua bowed deeply and ended the duel with one final, formal gesture. Huiyong slammed his fist shut with a triumphant roar. His plan had worked, and now there was no way he wasn't getting thrown out of the Udon sect. He tossed his hands behind his head like he owned the night, already picturing the freedom waiting for him. As night swallowed the sect's pavilions in silence, Chonhua stood in the courtyard, lost in deep thought. A gray-haired master closed in on him, pressing for his answer about what he'd decided. The old man's rage erupted. He demanded they throw Huiyong out right now for that filthy sand trick. But the examiner narrowed his eyes, replaying the boy's every move in his mind. He reminded everyone that the young man had only learned the triple fist technique a couple of days earlier. Right before his eyes, that flawless dodge snapped into view again. Those flawless, razor-clean moves screamed pure, unstoppable natural martial arts talent. The old master saw the truth, but the rules snapped in and forced punishment. Chanhua smirked like he already knew the next move. He was cooking up the perfect fate for the offender, like justice had to be served just right. The title page lit up like a fresh sunrise, signaling the start of a brand new day. The very next morning, the gray-haired master stood there like thunder and declared that Hui Yon would make amends for his mistake at the Gokchon Pavilion. And he made it crystal clear, the boy better be grateful for that mercy. The master stormed off, clicking his tongue in pure irritation, and the young man froze like he'd been hit by lightning, because, somehow, he wasn't expelled. In pure hysteria, he yanked his own hair, unable to comprehend how his brilliant plan could have fallen apart. The young man slumped on the ground, crushed by despair, while that familiar student beamed and cheered like he'd just saved him. An acquaintance told Huion to train harder and trust his talent, but Huion just scowled. He knew his own body inside and out. Back in his past life, he'd been a successful merchant, yet in battle he moved like a clumsy elephant, stumbling through every fight. Every scrap of skill he had from yesterday didn't come from practice at all. It all hinged on a single magical scroll tied to a system skill shop. He realized there was no point in arguing, and a weary sigh slipped out of him like defeat. After he tore himself away from his comrade, the boy trudged straight to the spot where he was about to be punished. As he went, he forced himself to breathe. No more sudden exile was coming. He stopped at the gates of the financial pavilion, ready to slip in and snatch something quietly. Then, the moment he saw the inside, horror hit him at the sheer scale of it all. The boy's jaw dropped, completely stunned. Right in front of him, that familiar face stared back. It was none other than the same examiner, Jion Hua. So Huion hurried over and bowed with total respect. That friendly, smiling man hit him with the shock of his life, turns out. From now on, the boy would be stuck working here as nothing more than an ordinary errand boy. He'd have to haul financial documents to every pavilion, dragging them along mountain trails all the way to the farthest one, a grueling 4 hours from the start. Chanhua leaned in and softly urged, "Come on, let me show you the sect's grounds right now." The examiner strode ahead, barking out the order to follow. The boy's face drained of color in an instant, like a verdict had just slammed down. Nighttime swallowed the chasms as the sect's pavilions loomed overhead, lit only by dim lantern glow. Huiyong's hands shook as he nervously shoved his things into his bag. He refused to die a second early, plummeting off the cliff while he still fought to deliver the next stack of papers. He chose the one move that couldn't fail. And like a ghost, he slipped into the yard without a sound. He slipped in right when everyone's asleep, and the whole place was wide open. The young man bolted from where he stood and tore off the mountain at full speed. The young man stood alone in the night yard, staring into the shadowy buildings like they were hiding something. He finally wriggled free from the dorm, only to step into total pitch black outside. The boy crumpled the useless receipt in rage. If that stupid skill shop would have taken it, he'd have snagged night vision hours ago. No choice remained. He snatched a torch, then charged straight through. He strode ahead with total confidence. The fire's glow was about to blow his cover, but he had zero plans to get himself killed up in the mountains by some stupid accident. A cocky grin stretched across his face, like he already knew how the night would end. Suddenly, he slammed the brakes so hard he almost smashed right into a stranger's shadow. 2 guards burst out of the darkness. When they demanded he reveal who he was, the boy panicked and pretended he didn't know, stammering that he was only out collecting medicinal herbs. He kept insisting he'd dozed off, then jolted awake late at night. But the guards snorted in disbelief like, "What herb gatherer falls asleep on the job?" To prove it, he plucked a handful of fresh leaves and held them up. The guards knew nothing about botany, so they totally bought his act, and assumed the plain weeds he was holding were some kind of healing stash. The guards snapped their hands like, "Go on," and the boy finally exhaled, the tension melting off his shoulders. He was ordered to descend with total care, and he thanked his lucky stars as relief hit him. He slipped past the guard and sprinted down the stairs, grinning like he'd already escaped. The main gate rose ahead of him, glowing like the doorway to the freedom he'd been chasing. He beamed like everything finally made sense. But he suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. A familiar voice snapped from right behind him, ice cold, demanding where he thought he was rushing off to. In the dark, the man growled that trying to hide the escape was hopeless. Before him, Master Chonghua beamed with a calm, teasing smile. The young man spun around in terror, and his heart dropped as he recognized him. Chonghua was back again. And just like that, the story kicked off of the future martial arts god, cutting his path straight through for money. Rattled back to his senses, the fugitive swallowed hard and demanded to know how they caught him. He swung in, thinking he could gauge it wrong, only to realize he'd totally underestimated how razor-sharp a true warrior's vision really is. Every twitch of muscle and every flash of emotion screamed his true intentions without holding back. The young man shot him a straight question about his fate, but Zhanhua refused to answer until he cleared something up first. They halted right before the gates, and the master slammed the truth into them, that countless people out there are chasing their dream of getting into Udon. The question wouldn't let him breathe. Why is he clawing, scrambling, and begging to escape that cursed sect? The young man swallowed the truth and admitted he'd never have the strength to beat a third-generation disciple. Zhanhua smirked and said, "You didn't even swing once." He demanded total sincerity, swearing the whole conversation would stay locked away in secret. The master looked him in the eye and said he could already see outstanding power in him. The boy slammed his forehead, only to realize these talents weren't magic at all. They'd been bought from the system shop. He let out a heavy sigh and swore he'd tell the truth. He sucked in a trembling breath. He blurted out the first thing he could think. "The Udon sect is way too small for me." Dead silence slammed down like a wall. Chonhua suddenly shook from head to toe, and the young man's fear hit him like a punch. The boy inched closer, then reached out with shaky hope, asking, "Are you okay?" The master burst into sudden laughter, grinning as he said he understood that exact urge perfectly. The young man leaned in with hope, asking about freedom, only to get slammed with a sharp, icy refusal. Chonhua shot back, voice ice-cold, saying that once you're in a sect, you don't get to ignore insults like that. He inched his hand toward the sword's hilt, like the next second might ignite everything. The master's expression turned iron cold, and he vowed to unveil the real heart of Udon. The blade tore free with a metallic clang, blasting out dazzling blue energy like a flash of lightning. A brutal gust slammed into the boy's face, almost snuffing the torch out for good. The young man clapped his hand over himself, stunned, because he just realized it wasn't the wind at all. Chonhua unleashed a lightning-fast sword swing that cut through the air in a blur. A brutal shockwave slammed the boy off his feet, and he scrambled to brace himself against the wall. A colossal blue aura sphere burst open around the master. He demanded everyone watch closely. With one sharp step, Chonhua whipped up a swirling whirlwind around himself. The moment the power unleashed, the ground screamed beneath their feet. The master whirled in a lightning-fast spin, sword cutting through the air. He tore across the ground, leaving dazzling trails of light in his wake. The young man leaned in, eyes wide, watching those smooth moves glide like a mountain stream. Yet they were ferocious, blasting forward like a mountain torrent smashing into a tight, narrow gorge. Chonhua launched into the sky, blazing with an aura so deep and endless it felt like the ocean itself. He ripped downward with a blinding dive, and his blade sliced straight through the air. The sword slid into its sheath with a clean, unstoppable snap. Under the moonlight, Manhwa unleashed the legendary Tai Chi sword of wisdom like it was pure destiny. The blade finally stopped pirouetting in the air. On the stone floor, a scorched yin-yang symbol sat there, burned by raw energy. The boy froze in place, blinking like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The master broke into a warm grin, then leaned in and asked, "So, everything clear to you now?" The young man gulped for air, like he'd just fought his own lungs for every breath. He asked, totally confused, what on earth Manhwa was trying to pull off with all of this. The young man blinked hard, totally thrown off, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He pressed them again, demanding to know exactly what they wanted him to say. He stood in front of the Wudong sect gate, fist locked tight around his weapon, and demanded answers about the elder's real motives. Not a reply. His master snapped his hand forward, and a purple aura blazed out like a loud, undeniable flex of the sect's true power. The boy jerked back, clutching a torch out front like a tiny, helpless shield. The old elder just smiled, soft and steady, and promised Udon he'd make room for everyone. He slammed his forehead in frustration. Why are these fanatics trying to yank him into the monks by force? The boy clutched the torch even tighter, then finally threw his hands up. Those words just wouldn't cut through that stubborn thing. He shot out an apology for his harshness, then instantly blew up in shouting that he absolutely refuses to stay on that mountain. The master slowly lifted his eyebrows like he already knew what was coming. The young kids swung their arm and sent the flames roaring in a wild wave. He bellowed that he had every personal right to refuse. The man rubbed his chin like he was weighing fate, then snapped that the boy had zero clue how powerful he truly was. The elder stayed ice calm and shut it down. He couldn't let that child drop into the well, and unless the youth got an order, he wouldn't leave the mountain. The boy cowered behind his parents, but the master snapped him away coldly, promising they'd be thrilled to have a mentor like him. The youth ripped the silence apart with a desperate, heart-stopping scream. He slammed fire forward with brutal force, and it was like a reminder that he was only the son of plain, ordinary peasants. He just couldn't make sense of it at all. Why would the mighty Udon sect be stuck needing some ragged nobody like that? The elder snapped with raw rage, like he was snarling, "Just because?" The master shot a triumphant finger up into the air. So he slammed the door shut on the whole fight. The very next morning hit like a wrecking ball, and the escape plan crumbled completely. The boy froze, staring into the void in pure shock, because 1 second later, he was officially, at least for now, an internal disciple. The mentor spoke in a calm voice, admitting that teaching a total beginner would be a nightmare. Turns out the sect leader flat out refused the novice at first, fueled by distrust, and the boy quietly nodded along, bitterly agreeing with every doubt in his head. The master grinned and clutched his fist tight, demanding he train harder until sweat soaked him. And the disciple slammed his hands over his face, drowning in pure despair. In the boy's head, one thought kept pounding like a drum. If he wanted to get stronger, he had to buy skills, and to do that, he'd need to earn money outside the sect. Even a pathetic handful of coins could finally buy him a shot at escaping again. He snapped at the mentor and shot back a straight-up question about the money. The elder froze dead still, utterly shocked by that kind of brazen disrespect. The boy innocently scratched his cheek like he had nothing to hide. He begged to trade the old receipt for cash because he couldn't survive without his coins. They rushed to the Gokchon Pavilion, and their mentor hit him with a blunt reminder. The mandatory punishment work was coming. The master rattled a brutal pile of coins and, with total calm, swore he'd hold on to every single one until the job was done. The young kid went completely still, like the fear had nailed him to the spot. Then he erupted into wild screams, clawing for his property back. The mentor shot him a disgusted look as the student foamed at the mouth, insisting that money mattered more right now than some ghostly future. With a fake, worried tone, the man leaned in and pushed, asking how much interest he could snag. He clutched the money tight to his chest, hiding it with iron confidence. The master leaned in, close enough to breathe, and whispered, "He knows exactly this money is going straight into another escape attempt." Suddenly, loud, heavy footsteps pounded the ground, and an irritated voice snapped through the air. A gloomy, bearded man stomped into the room. He scratched the back of his head, grimacing in annoyance after someone yanked him out of sleep. It was Chong-Su, and his mentor didn't let him forget it, teasing him like he was the pavilion head, even as that fresh demotion still stung. Chong-Su eyed the boy with sharp suspicion. He didn't look like any martial arts master at all. The mentor smirked to himself, shoved the student off with that gloomy guy, and strolled away like nothing could touch him. Chong-Su skipped the formalities like they were nothing. He blared the schedule on the spot, an absolute nightmare shift, from 5 a.m. all the way to 5 p.m. The job looked easy, just carrying bamboo tubes all the way to the Samcheon Pavilion. It sat way up on the very peak of an impregnable mountain, unreachable to anyone below. Mount Udan thrusts into the sky, and its impossible peak disappears straight into the clouds high above. Panic crashed over the boy. Without fast-travel tricks, he'd miss every single deadline, no matter what. Like that still wasn't bad enough. The bearded man jabbed a finger at 3 colossal sacks, each hooked up to thick tubes. The young man snapped into full hysteria on the floor, refusing to end his life even for a second. Then they hit him with a chilling threat: expulsion. The moment he said it, the student snapped shut and went silent. Chong-Su loomed over him like a nightmare and swung straight for the one weak point. Expulsion would shatter his dantian into wreckage, and he'd be stuck as a cripple for the rest of his life. The boy clutched his stomach, convulsing, and the trap's true size finally hit him like a wrecking ball. That's why his mentor chose him, made him an inner disciple right from the start. Biting down on his teeth, he spat curses under his breath, unable to calm himself. He heaved an unliftable sack onto his back like it was nothing. Clinging to the stones with sheer grit, he hauled himself upward, fury roaring as he cursed every master in that cursed sect. Exhaustion hit like a wave. His hand shook violently as it desperately clung to the cliff's edge. Huion grimly heaved and barely managed to drag the heavy body off the ground. Sweat poured off him as he gasped for breath like he'd just been chased for miles. He crumpled onto the ground, barely holding on. Only the breathtaking view from the summit could steady him. Just as things were starting to settle down, another student suddenly burst in and cut the rest short. He snatched up the delivered messages with a dry, biting tone, and even called out the delay. Hurling a look over his shoulder like a warning came with it, the student headed out, because the master had flat-out banned Huion from leaving until he delivered everything. The young man flashed a bitter smile, like it hurt to do it. Quietly he spat curses at the merciless masters of the Udan sect. The night burned away, and a crisp, clear morning burst into the sky. Master Chong-Su stormed out of the room to meet the senior student. He flashed a soft smile and asked where Huion had vanished to. The master snapped his blade shut, then growled that tossing the newbie to the Samcheon Pavilion was a downright vicious joke. Beneath the pavilion's rock sat the sect's movement technique secret, the kind that goes way deeper than anyone expects. If you didn't nail the logic behind those steps, there was no way you'd scale that sheer wall. The path ahead was a death trap, one wrong step away from disaster. Any normal person would have plummeted into that abyss without a second thought. That senior student gave a cheerful shrug and casually dropped the truth. Jung-Soo himself was the one who dragged the boy up there and kept him climbing until way past nightfall. The master let out a heavy sigh. Dragging even that kind of talent into the dark felt like it would snap his spirit in two. Then, out of nowhere, the other person calmly said their worries were all for nothing. He told the master to just look inside the room. Chung-Soo froze right at the doorway, unable to believe what he was seeing. One other student confirmed it. He delivered every single message with 0 misses. Kvi-yeon was fast asleep on the floor, surrounded by a chaotic mess of scattered stuff. In one wild night, the young man pulled off the impossible like it was nothing. The cargo was overflowing, way too much to carry. To lug it all, he'd have to survive that deadly climb at least 3 brutal times. The master's imagination went absolutely feral. He pictured that young man pounding his bruised hands raw on jagged stones until they bled. The picture exploded with vivid color and life. The young man scrambled up the wall, biting down on a bamboo scroll like it was his lifeline. Chon-Soo admitted it plain as day. If that kid had shown up to the sect sooner, he'd have been forged into a true pillar of martial arts. Suddenly, the senior disciple shot a sly squint, like he'd just caught something important. He eased himself down beside the sleeping one, going quiet as a shadow. Grinning ominously, he pushed even harder, urging them to press the young man for more. Kvi-yeon jolted awake out of nowhere, blinking away the sleep still clinging to his eyes. He stretched with relief, absolutely thrilled he made it through yesterday, thanks only to the agile step technique. Still mentally praising the skill shop, he suddenly locked eyes with Chon-Soo's stern stare. The master barked at him, roaring, "Get up, now!" The young man tried to flip the blanket over, but Chon-Soo recoiled in disgust and wouldn't touch that slobbered mess. Kvi-yeon muttered his grudge under his breath, sounding like he was seriously annoyed at some grump, and stuffed the fur deep into the bag. He didn't get a second to breathe, no rest, no pause. The master snapped, ordering them to grab the new messages and follow him. No questions, just move. Words were pointless. They slipped onto the mountain path in dead silence, moving like they couldn't afford to make a sound. Dread hit the young man as he stared at that familiar road. Was the universe really about to force him back into courier work again? Out of nowhere, a thick piece of fabric snapped through the air and slammed into his face. Kvi-yeon blinked in confusion at the blindfold. Then his master's cold voice snapped, "Tie it over your eyes." Then he shot a thumb over his shoulder, jabbing straight at the sheer cliff behind him. "Climb up." With that kind of insolence, the boy snapped and hurled the fabric down to the ground in a fit of fury. He exploded into the air with a furious shout. He flat out refused to execute that suicidal order on blind faith. Chon-Soo didn't even argue. He just unleashed a deadly aura, and the terrified Kvi-yeon yanked the blindfold tight right away. He stopped dead, staring at the stone wall like it was about to swallow him whole. He had absolutely no clue what to do next. It was a cold, direct command: hit the ground and shatter to death. The boy slowly pressed his fingers against the bump. One wrong move, and it was over, right there. No second chances. The second his fingertips brushed the stone, a burst of blazing blue light tore out from his hand. Something changed. Kvi-yeon's whole body went still, and pure shock hit him like a lightning strike. With the tight bandage wrapped tight on him, his eyes snapped wide with pure amazement. He could spot the perfect route up ahead without a doubt. Shimmering bursts of light shot straight across the bare stone, carving it with blazing energy lines. The boy swaggered up that razor-steep cliff like he owned the sky. He guided himself through a storm of flickering light, right up until his eyes shut tight. He burst into the middle. He ripped the bandage off in one sudden yank. His hand snapped with blue energy, and the rock suddenly started yanking itself upward, like it was pleading to be pulled. He was gulping air like he'd just been chased through hell. Something about him felt wildly wrong, like destiny just shifted in the room. Every step he took, every touch he made, rang with this eerie, bone-deep resonance. The light snapped into place, carving out one perfect path. A surge of inner power throbbed in perfect sync with every one of his moves. He stormed up to the summit, like the peak was daring him to reach it. A wild, unreal lightness surged through his body. It was a special technique, one that sent a warm surge straight into his dantian. Then, wham! A thick folio smashed into his head, and pain shot through him like fire. His mentor didn't just dislike his stubborn headband, he flat out wasn't having it. Clutching his bruised spot, the apprentice blinked in pure confusion at the cover. Etched on it, the words blazed, "Steps of the Azure Veil." The mentor snapped, cutting him off without a shred of mercy. Right now, he's only cracked the technique's outer shell. Real mastery won't click until the theory finally unlocks it. The boy turned the book over in his hands, weighing it like it held the next big answer. In his old life, he couldn't even master the simplest style. But because he kept tripping over his own 2 feet, he never once managed to master them. Now, everything had flipped, like the whole world changed overnight. And now he's clutching in his hands a real treasure, power from a legendary sect. And yeah, this was just a tiny crumb, because the mentor swore that once he took him on as an inner disciple, he'd unleash techniques way stronger than anything before. When they asked if he still wanted to run, the boy froze for a beat, then, with nerves buzzing, he cautiously asked if there was work waiting for him in the secular world. The moment he realized that service in the pavilion could be his ticket to opening his own trading company, hope lit him up like fireworks. The mentor yanked him out of the clouds and back to reality. Since the head hadn't given direct permission, dreaming about it was pointless. The apprentice let out a heavy sigh, started edging toward the exit, and then one hard reprimand snapped through the air and froze him in place. The mentor seethed at the idea of him quitting, even though the boy honestly believed his courier duties were fully done. Turns out the rules flipped hard. Now he got stuck taking care of every single delivery for the whole pavilion. Patience was slipping away. Inside the boy, rage churned like a storm. He couldn't stand these insolent masters. He clenched his teeth so hard, it felt like pain. Even the bandits don't break the deal without slamming you with a warning first. The mentor just stood there, quietly staring, as his mind erupted in fury at those stupid monks. In the very next breath, a brutal punch slammed into the boy's chest, stealing every breath right out of him. He crumpled to the ground in misery, like the fight just drained the life right out of him. And the master, stone cold, declared that he was likely sick of living. With a mocking sneer, the mentor towered over him, looming like a judgment. Then let him drop dead right here if the elder's orders are truly that unbearable. A savage cry for mercy boomed across the mountain peaks like thunder itself. That brutal lesson didn't just hurt him, it lit the fuse for the new path he'd take next. By nightfall, the heavens tore open above the sect's residence. Cold rain blasted the courtyards, turning them into slick, shivering pools. The boy burst under the roof's eave at full speed. On the move, he yanked and wrung his drenched clothes dry, like he couldn't stand the wet sticking to him. He tore open his shirt to show off steel-hard muscles, then muttered through clenched teeth about the nasty weather that hit out of nowhere. After 2 grueling months of non-stop sprinting, his body finally clicked into place, handling every load like it was nothing, and even carving out spare time. Snapping back to that weird command, he yanked out a gleaming scroll. As the series evolved, the skill shop system got an upgrade too. The collection exploded into such a huge pile of skills that my eyes started darting like crazy across the endless list of techniques. The moment he flashed that satisfied smile at his own victories, he got another brutal hit right on the crown of his head, and pain instantly detonated. The apprentice crashed to the floor, sputtering in anger, and the mentor just stayed cool, then calmly questioned how you're supposed to use the steps in the rain. The master jabbed a finger at the muddy footprints still stamped in the puddles. The boy already got it. Those constant knocks weren't random at all. They were acupuncture, working his body back to life. Without that brutal push, his dantian would have overloaded and blasted apart. So he kept his mouth shut and listened, letting the okay for his new training sink in. An older apprentice burst into the room. He stepped up and greeted everyone with a warm, friendly smile. With a grin, the newcomer later stepped in and offered to escort the boy to the pavilion, then introduce him to everyone else. After he realized these people were about to become his official superiors, the boy swallowed hard, fear crawling up his throat. He gladly fell in step with the friendly guide. But there was no peace, only chaos roaring at his doorstep. Inside, he seethed, furious that this temporary apprentice routine had him stuck running errands. While everyone chased greatness, he hauled heavy parcels instead. This daily humiliation chewed at him until it felt unbearable. But the new mode of transportation still took the edge off a little. Charging toward the training ground, he braced himself for a face-to-face with wise, no-nonsense masters, clinging to hope as the moment closed in. But what he saw slammed the brakes on his body and left him frozen in pure shock. Right in front of him, a bunch of little kids stood their ground, blades of grass clenched like weapons in their hands. The kids suddenly surged in from every direction, swarming him at once. The kids demanded someone fix their toy flutes, right now, no excuses. 3 little brats closed in on him. They demanded someone fix their busted grass whistles. He prodded them with a shaky finger, grumbling to the senior student about whether he really had to bow to these kids. 20 years old and you're calling kids seniors? Nah, that's pushing it way too far. The little ones puffed out their chests like warriors, standing tall and waiting for respect to come to them. The senior gave a warm nod, smiling like that was just how martial arts worked. He forced out a creepy grin, scrambling to convince himself and everyone else that he was just a temporary student. The senior stayed cool and told him, "Don't rush. Take your time and ease in first." Then he blasted into the sky out of nowhere and vanished before the stunned kid could even blink. Suddenly, a voice erupted from right behind it. The company wasn't even close to full strength. Behind him, a little boy stood there, wearing an overly serious face like he had secrets to spill. He cocked his head with arrogant swagger, demanding an answer like he owned the room. The moment the other kids went dead quiet, the boy's heart dropped. He realized right then and there, the local leader was standing in front of him. The stern little boy puffed his cheeks and pouted like he was holding back a storm. He launched into a painfully long lecture about respecting the followers of the Tao. With a proud grin, he declared his spiritual name, Mayan Sun. The boy leaned in close, jabbed a finger at him, and called him out. He was the one breaking the rules. Mian Sun leaned over the class and fired off a lecture. Time is for training, not toys, while he nervously clutched something behind his back. With a crumpled blade of grass cradled in his hands, the boy suddenly understood it all. A little boy couldn't stand seeing others with what he didn't have. He was so jealous he just had to get that same flute too. With a heavy sigh, he decided to shake off the gloom, then popped a fresh blade of grass into his mouth to lighten the moment. A gentle melody burst into the air, like the story just took a breath. He brought the sopilka up to his lips and blew, letting the music hit the air. The empty yard swallowed the silence, and somehow the sound exploded right through it. The kids erupted into loud cheers, faces blazing with pure joy. Even as Mayan Sun tried to hold a stiff, stern face, he still muttered complaints about discipline under his breath. With lightning-quick hands, the young man carved yet another sopilka. He fixed the final sopilka. He bowed politely and handed it to Mayan Sun, then asked him to keep a watchful eye on the little ones. Mayan Sun turned beet red as he awkwardly grabbed the gift, and the other students snickered under their breath at his jealousy. Suddenly, a scream tore through the air and grabbed their attention. The calm shattered fast, and the chaos rushed in right after. 2 burly young men strode into the yard with total confidence. Mayan Sun instantly furrowed his brow, like something just set him off. Mian Khan towered ahead, all bulk and menace, wearing a sinister stare that sent chills down your spine. He started taunting Mayan Sun right away. The newcomer froze, completely baffled by their identical names. When he clocked that this towering giant was their age, his body tensed up before he could even stop it. Mian Khan towered over him like a living nightmare, vowing to rip off his hands for trading in the udon. One of the kids bolted forward, shaking with fear, and swore he'd handle it personally by punishing the younger one himself. Mian Khan snapped even harder when they called the newcomer younger. That big guy clocked him instantly, the same noob the mentor had been talking about all along. He squeezed his hand, mocking them with every cruel inch. He flashed an arrogant grin like he already owned the moment. And he snapped, right to the boy's face, "You're a fool." Without warning, his hand got snapped out of the way by a wooden sword. Mion's son clamped down on the hilt, yanking control away before the big guy could swing. Mion's son went ice cold and shut him down instantly, flat out saying it was his younger brother. The big guy's face snapped into a ruthless, predatory grin. The boy stumbled backward, terrified out of his mind. He longed to vanish without a single soul even noticing. A brutal confrontation was building to blow, right on the edge of eruption. The kids leaned in and whispered that the attackers weren't strangers at all. They were students of Uncle Mentor Chong Su. Factions with different masters kept clashing non-stop, and he just calmly dropped to the ground to watch it all unfold. Mian Han shoved for the chance to step back and punish the offender. But Mian's son stood his ground like a wall that refused to move. The big guy slashed with his stick, but his smaller student snapped in and slammed the hit right back. Mian's son yanked his sword up, eyes cold, and demanded they settle everything with weapons. Mian Han snarled with venomous fury. This was exactly the moment he'd been hunting for. They slammed into each other with ferocious force, sparks snapping into the air as their wooden weapons raked and tore. The kids erupted with the stats. Mian's son just won 108 out of 201 matches. The boy stared at the fight, completely blown away. Suddenly, something unbelievable hit him. Every fighter's move snapped into razor-sharp clarity. He tracked every brutal sword swing with terrifying ease. The opponent's leg technique name hit his mind like a lightning strike. Steps through the azure veil. Fresh knowledge slammed into his mind and snapped his eyes wide open. He saw every move they'd make, down to the final hit of this battle. Mion's son unleashed a brutal strike that sliced through the air with a sharp, ripping whistle. Mian Khan rocketed backward to escape the oncoming charge. The big guy crumpled to the ground and landed flat on his back, utterly powerless. Mion's son towered over the defeated enemy, chest heaving, breathing like a victory is burning inside him. The young fighter shoved his wooden sword right under the fallen senior's throat. He threw up a triumphant pose like he'd just won everything. The beaten one just scowled, eyes blazing with pure irritation at that cocky little upstart. Another boy pushed out of the crowd and boldly demanded the chance to show off a couple of moves. The young victor snapped his sword up in a razor-straight raise. He let out a loud, shaking breath. "With pleasure," the little one chirped, clenching the hilt like it was life itself. A boy with a ponytail lounged there, eyes drifting as he watched that kid burn with non-stop energy. The wooden blades slammed together so hard, sparks exploded into the air. The new opponent slammed all his weight into every single strike, turning each hit into a gut punch. Both of them got blasted backward by the next strike. A weapon went crashing to the floor with a sharp, loud clatter. One of the fighters could barely keep himself upright, slumped over his sword like it was the only thing holding him together. The opponent was gasping for breath, totally wiped out. The winner was seconds from celebrating when, out of nowhere, they froze in place. He leveled his finger at the kid and dared him to step into the next fight. After he smashed the weary opponent, he taunted him and asked, mocking, if he was about to bolt right then. With a defiant smirk, he snapped the command, "Attack!" Their swords crashed together again in a heavy, dull shock. The observer clocked it instantly. This was the commander's fight. When the first fighters fell, the defeated kept throwing out fresh challengers, until there was only one left standing. With one brutal shove, the boy lost his footing and slammed onto his back. The fight turned brutal fast, and on the observers' side, only 2 boys were still standing. A brutal hit slammed into the student's chest and crushed his spirit on the spot. Out here, even a single year of experience decided who walked away standing. The next fighter got hit with a crushing blow that changed everything. The battered boy stumbled weakly and collapsed at the spectator's feet, ponytail swaying above him. A burly senior student barreled right up to him. Towering and terrifying, the giant loomed over him like a nightmare with legs. He flashed a nasty grin and decided this insolent kid was about to learn a painful lesson. The ponytail boy sagged, shut his eyes, and grimly remembered how the kids had jumped into that brawl, right for his sake. When he saw the bruised faces of his defenders, he snapped and rushed in to stop it. The big guy shoved right in and demanded, in no uncertain terms, that they show him a few moves. The boy stood up without a word, and the giant jerked with a nervous gulp. He snapped his composure back in place in a flash, then cracked his knuckles as pure rage surged through him. For a split second, the air froze solid with pure tension. The big guy was told to kneel, but all he got was a chilling order to stop spouting nonsense. The giant clenched his massive fist, ready to smash it down and make things go badly fast. The boy smirked and clapped a hand over his mouth, laughing at the ridiculous idea that this towering kid still counts as a child. Their enemy's patience snapped like a whip. Rage-fueled, the big guy lunged ahead with a blood-curdling scream. His fist tore through the air, slicing it with a sharp, bone-chilling whistle. The punch landed so hard it tore up the ground and flung a cloud of dust into the air. The boy easily slipped the attack, grinning with total confidence. He clocked every move the opponent made before it even hit the air. He slipped through those vicious blows like they never even touched him. Back in his past life, he had to stare down battles so brutal and tangled that they'd make your head spin. The big guy kept driving forward, hammering the exact same step-by-step move he always uses. The boy nimbly slipped out of every strike like it was nothing. In the end, he didn't just know it, he had this technique locked in his bones. The enemy snorted with pure irritation, slamming the air again and again like it couldn't stand the silence. Embarrassment hit him like a truck, and he just froze on the spot. He did something dumb and just stared at his own hand. Again, it missed. But right then, the boy folded in hard. Turns out he'd totally misjudged what his body could do. Pain slammed into his hand, unbearable and relentless. The big guy seized the opening and unleashed a huge, sweeping punch that cut across everything. The boy just barely threw himself down in time and avoided it. These kids didn't just train, they forged their inner energy day after day for years. He just barely dodged a kick that would have smashed him straight into the stone floor. The enemy kept piling on the pressure, fueled by way more stamina than they had any right to possess. The boy finally understood. One single missed punch, and that would be the end. He snapped his eyes into a sharp, focused stare. "Let's take the risk," his mind screamed. Then he slammed straight into the strike. He threw himself back at the very last second. A massive fist tore through the space by millimeters, inches from slamming into his face. It barely grazed his cheek, but it still leaked a thin ribbon of blood. The big guy froze in shock when his opponent didn't counter at all. He just leaned back. He still couldn't wrap his head around why he'd leaped straight into danger itself. The blast slammed into him, his head snapped back, and blood sprayed out of his mouth. The kids stared at the spectacle, frozen in pure terror. The body hit the stone slabs with a heavy, dull thud. He stayed frozen in place, motionless in the choking dust. The giant stared at the defeated fighter, utterly baffled, still clueless about how it all went down. Myeon-sun just froze in pure confusion. He hadn't even landed a single hit, and his opponent still moved like it was already over. Then a stern voice snapped behind him, cutting through the air. Two furious masters inched toward the courtyard, like trouble was stalking the ground. Chon-yu's face twisted in full-blown rage as he snapped the question again. The terrified student barely scraped out a whisper as a heavy hand slammed down on his head. His mentor snapped, cutting him off with a grim stare. He shot over here faster than the wind, just to demand answers. He carefully steadied his student, then jerked him back and slammed his head until blood sprayed everywhere. As Chon-hwa spoke, calm as ever, he set the stage for a kid's brawl. Rage seethed through Chon-yu as he cracked Hui-yon with several brutal slaps. The young man wiped his ruined nose in silence while the crowd erupted, screaming that beating a newcomer was absolutely not allowed. The master's eyes turned cold as he clenched his teeth and snapped, commanding the apprentice to apologize. The boy wiped at his bruised face, grimacing as pain lingered. He watched the masters in eerie silence. Between the two of them, things were so bad, it felt like the worst thing imaginable. He clocked the mastermind plan and knew it would work. Chon-hwa let him get punched on purpose, straight into humiliating disgrace. The battered apprentice dropped his head low and bowed, pouring out heartfelt apologies. Myeon-han yanked his battered face up from the wreckage, and he barely managed to squeeze out a soft, shaky, "Sorry." Chon-yu snapped his head toward the exit, like he'd just spotted his way out. But Hui-yon slammed the brakes on him out of nowhere. The irritated master snapped a look over his shoulder at the brazen kid stealing all the attention. The young man carelessly jabbed his bruised skin with a finger, like, "Tell me what you think," because he wanted the harsh verdict from the most injured person. He snapped in, annoyed, and said, "We already apologized, so can we move on?" And the boy burst into a huge, wide grin. He thrust out his hand, unflinching, and demanded a couple of coins for the treatment. Rage tore through Chon-yu and shook him to the core. The cheeky brat threw out a price of 2 silver coins, then smirked like it was still a steal. The master lunged to rip the wallet right out of his hands. But Hui-yon clamped him to her chest with a death grip, like she was daring anyone to doubt it. The money was earned honestly. Then Chon-hwa swooped in and cut him down with sarcasm, praising the boy's performance like his theatrical fall was pure art. Hui-yon stuffed the loot under his coat like a pro and feigned innocence, then sweetly asked how he could have noticed everything. The master confessed that he'd watched the fight from the absolute first second. And just like that, he spotted the trap behind the scheme. He snapped coldly at the young man, couldn't land a single hit on that kid, and not a shred of shame ever crossed his face. Hui-yon lazily picked at his ear and flat out didn't give a damn. He calmly admitted he never learned how to fight, and he has zero plans to trade strength blows with battle-scarred masters. Chon-hwa clenched his fist. He wasn't his mentor, but now he was going to slam those insolent words into respect. His eyes barely had time to open wide in shock. A brutal impact slammed him face first into the stone floor. The master brushed the dust from his hands with total calm, because in martial arts, excuses don't stand a chance. He told him to calm down, because if he didn't, things would only spiral into something worse. And the battered young man sprawled there, scrambling to pull his thoughts into order. Hui-yon shoved his bloodied face up past the shattered tiles and let out a ragged, pitiful plea, begging them to stop. And that's how the whole madness kicked off. From that day on, his life got ripped apart, turning into one endless grind of brutal daily training. At first, he brutalized his own body with crushing heavy workouts. Then Chon-hwa tore into him with ruthless strikes, beating him so close to death he barely made it. The master wiped his brow with satisfaction, called it meridian stimulation, and turned the boy into a cutlet. After all those procedures, Hui-yon crumpled to the ground and lay there for hours, breathing so shallow it barely counted. Finally, his patience snapped like a rubber band under pressure. He snapped into action and knew he had to rush to the combat skills system right now. The boy decided to stash every coin because he believed the real wins would come when better times finally arrived. But after those brutal daily beatings, doors started flying open to fresh opportunities left and right. He decided to cash in the 2 silver coins he'd just won. With a fearless grin, he lunged for the legendary sword mastery skill he'd been chasing. 2 coins in his grip exploded into shimmering dust the instant they hit his hand. The system locked in the order and confirmed the purchase. The senior mentor strode up to Huiyan while he pumped dumbbells, flashed a smile, and asked how the training results were going. Huiyan quietly kept bending his heavy metal arms, pushing through the weight like it was nothing. He dropped the weights and deadpanned. No joy, just the grind every single day. The mentor let out a fake sigh, then snapped his fist shut like he was about to explode. He told the kid to loosen up and let his muscles unwind. He snapped into a fighting stance and barked the warning, "If you flinch or tense up, you're getting clocked twice." A crushing punch ripped through the air, and the dumbbells exploded apart, flying off in every direction like they'd been launched by a cannon. Huiyan clenched his teeth and slammed the hit straight against his chest. In his head, he practically reveled, because that kind of power couldn't even shake him. His whole body got swallowed by ghostly armor as the 8th-level skill, Strong Body, cranked up full power, powered by those 2 silver coins he'd just paid. The mentor snapped backward, stunned by the student's unshakable resolve. As the elder stared at his bruised fist in shock, Huiyan snapped to a realization. He didn't need fancy moves at all. A swarm of cheap, low-level techniques would get the job done. He grinned to himself, picturing the day he'd rise as the mightiest Murim warrior, starting with nothing but the simplest skills. The mentor rolled his shoulders, then shrugged off logic like it was nothing. His fist ignited with a blue aura, because after the student leveled up his endurance, the training load had to be turned up. Huiyan's eyes went wide with pure horror, because he suddenly remembered, some prices are high for a reason. The yard erupted in a brutal explosion that made the ground shake like it had a heartbeat. That bargain price never shows the full story. It's hiding something nasty behind the curtain. The dust finally cleared, and right in the open, there it was, the manhwa's title staring us in the face. A scared boy peeked from behind the wall, then hurriedly asked the fallen Huiyan, "Are you still alive?" The boy urged him to scream in pain to make the executioner feel sorry. Yet Huiyan cut him off cold, saying that trick wouldn't work here. The boy tried to step in himself, but Huiyan shut him down, because if he pushed it, things would only spiral harder. With a last wave, the boy called out, "Good luck," and sent his wishes from the Gokchen pavilion. Huiyan stared after him with a grim face beside the child. The mentor's voice turned soft, but humiliation slammed into him too hard, and he knew he had to break free and flee the sect. He charged straight for the massive gate of the main building. Inside, a goatee-wearing man stopped him cold, waved him away, and told him straight up, no assignments. Huiyan pushed back again and again, but the man snapped at him to stop stalling and get moving to training. Huiyan slowly bowed his head in silence. Then, in the next heartbeat, he dropped to his knees, clamped onto the man's leg like his life depended on it, and let out a trembling whimper that the training was going to destroy him. Ordered to get lost, the youth shot up at once, wiped away those tears like a pro, and apologized with pure, icy venom. Just then, another sect official burst through the doorway and told them about a huge fair in Ichan, where the Shanxi Trade Guild was begging for security. When he heard the mission was this massive, 50 guilds involved, Huiyan hit the floor again, eyes wide, ears straining like they could catch destiny. Guarding people this rich pays like crazy, so yeah, they hire Udan masters. The goateed man exploded with rage when they offered him a measly 10 silver for the work. Rage exploded in him as he kicked Huion in the leg, shouting curses at the merchant's greed, while the official stayed stone calm, calmly counting back how he'd bought the salt. The deal looked insanely generous, 30 socks for 10 coins, and if you bought in bulk, they even sweetened it with a bigger discount. The official threw up a shining silver ingot and a stack of salt briquettes, sealing the deal for everyone to see, roughly 30 socks for 10 silver coins. Huion snapped up from his seat, yanked a jolt through the room, and the man recoiled. Then Huion blared that the merchants had finally lost their minds. The man yanked the youth up by the collar in pure rage, but Huion snapped back fast, apologized, then said those prices didn't even exist 10 years ago. The elder shot back that the youth wasn't even alive back then, so Huion snapped his focus inward and reminded himself, clear as day, that he'd gone back to the past. He remembered it all too well. 10 silver coins should have bought them around 60 socks, not just 30. The young guy stared off in thought, completely brushing off the stunned looks from the people he was talking to. And it hit him like lightning. The salt sales system still hadn't changed a bit. Before all this, you couldn't trade without a yomin license, and it was handed out only in the north. It all came down to one simple reason. Because of all the logistical chaos, local traders seized a monopoly and wouldn't let anyone else in. Borderlands turned into a bustling distribution hub, and only licensed merchants got to play the middleman. They called this system Catch and Pop, and soon, bam, it's getting wiped out. A brand new strict law is about to replace it. Cholsekche. Every single grain of salt will fall straight under the central authorities' control. Huion couldn't even pin down the real reason they tore down the old system. Sounds like the state was just biding its time, ready to squeeze the merchants for tax evasion the second the moment hit. And the big shocker? The price just crashed by half, so salt finally becomes affordable for everyone. Huion racked his mind, burning through every possible consequence. Two elders watched him brainstorm in dead silence, eyes locked on every idea. The instant the system flips, prices drop. So if Udan buys salt at the old rate, the sect will get absolutely wrecked and hemorrhage huge money. The merchants of Shanxi slash prices in a panic, trying to shove their old stock out the door before the market fully collapses. Huion snapped his hand onto the bearded man's shoulder like a command was about to be delivered. He slammed the table and demanded the purchase be cancelled right now. The man waved him away, determined not to walk out on a sweet, profitable deal. Then Huion went all in. Greedy merchants don't drop their prices for nothing. They're slick con artists. Every move is for themselves, and every coin lands straight in their pockets. The young man shot up a finger and set it straight. He wouldn't let merchants get dragged, but this was the only way he'd get the elder to finally hear him. The man boldly demanded, "Are you ready to answer for what you said?" And Huion didn't even hesitate as he happily agreed. As the elders traded uneasy looks, the boy's heart leapt. If this reform finally clicks, he'll rise as the sect's hero savior. He even pictured it. Everyone would start shouting, "Ray of Light," turning his own name into a spark of legend. Suddenly, a stern voice snapped through the air, ordering him to repeat every single word, right there before the sect's head. Huion's face twisted as he snapped, "What? Excuse me?" His eyes went wide with absolute shock, then snapped into a razor-sharp stare. He ditched the cramped office and stepped into a massive hall, then bowed so low to the elite of Wudong it looked like he was ready to disappear. Right in front of him, one of the 5 greatest swordsmen in the world stood like a living storm. The Chunhui sect's leader himself. The Wudong sect's head kept completely silent, like he was holding something massive back. He exuded a heavy, icy presence that chilled the air around him. The mentor barked a harsh reprimand at the young man, calling out his disrespect for the elders and his outrageous nerve right before the leader himself. The boy stood there, calm as stone, taking the elder's stare straight on. The leader narrowed his eyes, replaying Master Zhenghua's words about this kid like they were fresh in his mind. He didn't spot anything remarkable in the young man, but he still bet everything on his old comrade's gut feeling. The elder nodded and let the mentor lay out exactly why the sect must refuse to buy salt at the fair. He leaned in and locked onto every word. The mentor went rigid, suddenly feeling how heavy every word he spoke could be. He froze, utterly baffled, and the whole room went silent. Then the young man stepped forward with unstoppable calm and shot his hand up first, taking charge. The chief blurted in shock that the boy was actually standing here as the face of their pavilion. The young man cut in coolly and made it crystal clear he had zero plans to represent anyone's interests. The mentor shot him a vicious glare, then, just like that, backed off and let him speak. The chief took a sizzling sip of tea, realizing the discount on Shaanxi salt was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. "Why risk everything when the trade's already paying off?" he demanded, eyes hard as stone. The boy grinned and said, "Don't worry, there's still tons of time to get what we need." A sly grin snapped onto his face, so the big players would brush off the fair like it didn't even matter. The chief slammed the table and demanded proof, no excuses. From behind the door, a timid voice piped up, right in the middle of that tense conversation, cutting through the silence. A jittery young man slipped into the room like he expected trouble any second. He stepped forward with respect and introduced himself. Han Yan. The leader snapped straight into action, grilling him about the trades coming up next. The guest flat out confirmed that the merchants from Huizhou weren't going there. All three leaned in and listened like their lives depended on it. The air was speaking, and they didn't dare miss a word. Han Yan made it crystal clear, none of the 15 clans had any intention of showing up. The elder let the guest go, and our hero just grinned, whistling like he couldn't be happier. It finally clicked. Master Zhenghua's logic made total sense. The mentor's face burst back into his mind like a sudden flare of light. He stared him down and warned him, "Don't gamble blindly. Stop rushing into danger." The boy flashed a sly grin, shutting every doubt down like it was nothing. He mentally sized up the sect like a clueless kid, already willing to swallow losses on purpose. The leader leaned in and demanded to know how that plain student could have so much market knowledge. He carelessly blurted out his whole trading past like it was nothing. The old elder spun around in silence. Then he shot up and canceled the whole purchase on the spot. He snapped the mentor's name and ordered him straight to the fair, salt, and only salt, on his own. The young man snapped his eyes wide at the twist. Turns out that same order had just landed on him, too. The leader loomed over him like a crushing shadow, shutting down every single objection without mercy. The order left zero room for debate. No maybe, no questions. He made it crystal clear. They'd go as a team and finish the job together. A tense silence snapped into the air. The boss slammed down one brutal rule: bring the salt for less than the current price, or face punishment. The young man erupted in pure indignation. Snagging a discount from those ruthless Shaanxi merchants is basically suicide. The sect's leader spoke cool as ice, explaining that they weren't just hoarding salt for themselves, they were supplying it too. They rush it out across all of Hubei province, pulling families away from the brink of shortage. That's why this product has to be in their hands, no matter what it takes. The boy grimaced hard, like it hurt to even show his face. He clapped a sharp hand to his chest, groaning that now he's stuck dealing with this mess. The young man flat out refused to work for free. He demanded a promise that he'd get a cut of the profits. An imaginary abacus snapped into his mind with a sudden, satisfying click. He shamelessly jacked up the price and then lunged straight into a ruthless back and forth with the sect leader himself. Even the mentor snapped up his hand to cover his face at that blatant, nerve-wracking disrespect. Finally, the boy beamed and shot his hand forward, locking in the deal for just £5. He quickly crunched the numbers and figured out exactly how many coins separated the old price from the new one. His fist clenched tight, like something was about to explode. The young man snapped around without warning, practically daring the head to keep his promise. The door crashed shut, echoing like the end of the world. The mentor leaned in, eyes filled with doubt, and wondered if it was really worth trusting a rogue like that. He honestly had no idea how the head even knew the student was greedy for money. The old merchant just let out a calm sigh, because he'd never turn away from profit. The young man, grass blade clenched between his teeth, snapped his eyes wide in shock. Before he could even get the words out, Huiyun bolted up the stairs, gasping like he'd run a mile. Still gasping for air, he blurted out questions about whether he had any ties to the Shaanxi merchants. He couldn't believe it. Someone from Shaanxi actually chose Wudang, when everyone like him usually picked a different sect. Huiyun nodded and told him, "I'm just staying cautious." The young man shrugged it off. "The Shaanxi folks always come through to sell salt. It's nothing special, just the usual." Huiyun's fist slammed shut with a bone-crunching crack. He snapped, grim and certain, that those dealers had banded together just to screw them over. The young man shot his eyes wide in shock. Other students snapped into rage the second they clocked what those rascals were up to, selling ordinary salt for profit. The boy planted himself in a fierce bow, blade of grass held tight as his head dropped. He snapped that he was going to hit the foreigners first. Huiyun flashed a sly smile, like he already knew how this was going to end. In the cutthroat world of traders, deception is basically the rule book, because once someone gets played, they're instantly branded the guilty one. It was the iron law that decided whether they lived or died. But ripping off locals right on their own turf, that was a whole new level of trouble. It's been like this since the dawn of time. Local merchants didn't just stay put. They were the first ones to rise up and defend their home. Even though Huiyun knew the truth, this was never about them helping anyone else. It was all about saving their own future losses. The young man narrowed his eyes and demanded to know point-blank how the Chanxians planned to pull the wool over their eyes. Soft footsteps crept up behind him, and a voice snapped that no one would stand for being manipulated. The students snapped around in a heartbeat. A tall guy with long black hair sauntered up to them like he owned the moment. He flashed a friendly grin and urged them to step aside for a quick talk. A massive showdown was creeping closer, and you could feel the tension in the air. Their talk spilled out into the deserted courtyard of Wudan, and the silence felt like it had teeth. Huiyun narrowed his eyes at the stranger, instantly suspicious, because he demanded to know how the guy seemed to know everything. Then, like it was nothing, he tossed out a question about repealing the trade law. The long-haired man froze in place, like the world just slammed the brakes. His eyes instantly hardened, and Huiyun's suspicions were confirmed in an instant. This kid slyly hid the fact that he was the king of merchants' son, like it was a secret weapon. They locked eyes across the room, both frozen in silence, sizing up the enemy like it might explode any second. The stranger finally admitted he never saw this level of sharp awareness coming from just an apprentice. Even the capital officials were clueless about the new law, so he marched straight in and demanded an introduction to the powerful patron, Huiyun. He flashed a confident smile, like he already knew how it would all end. He shot his hand up, cut him off mid-sentence, and snapped that he didn't owe anyone an explanation. A merchant's real weapon isn't a blade or fancy talk, it's a secret. He spoke in a calm voice, like he wasn't bothered at all. For one heartbeat, everything went silent. Then the long-haired man erupted into wild laughter. He cackled non-stop across the whole yard. With tears still clinging to his cheeks, the boy confessed that these exact words had been drilled into him by his father for years. Huiyun grinned to himself, because long before he even returned, he'd already trained under the king of merchants. He shot his hand out and demanded help on the spot, then got hit with an instant, no excuses refusal. The long-haired man spun toward the railings and snapped that the guild elders had already settled everything. His faction will look the other way on the competitors' dirty schemes as long as they get their cut of the salt profits. Huiyan let out a dramatic sigh, acting like that outcome crushed her. They smirked like they already knew they'd win. But Huiyan carelessly blurted out that the deal between traders is always perfectly balanced. The long-haired man's eyes snapped wide in pure shock the second someone said smuggling. He snatched his head in shock, speechless at just how much dirt this guy knew. In total despair, he yanked Huiyan by the collar and swore he'd pay 10,000 silver coins if he could set up a meeting with his patron. Huiyan barely managed to hold back a laugh. No way he was spilling the truth about time travel, so he cleared his throat instead. Once he saw bribery was useless, the long-haired man tossed the whole idea aside and walked away. His people will just stand there and watch while everyone else bleeds and loses everything. Then Huiyan slammed the cards onto the table and exposed it all. This sect leader demanded he sell salt below market price or face the punishment waiting for him. The long-haired man erupted into laughter once more. He instantly clocked it. Huiyan just pissed off the leader, and now he's already plotting to cash in on the price difference. Eyes sparkling with curiosity, he demanded the exact plan. Huiyan leaned in and hissed his secret, and the other guy's face snapped into instant shock. Just as their conversation was heating up, a burly, bald disciple stomped onto the stairs and loomed there like a threat. "That conversation of yours," Sagon-hyun drawled it like a threat, leaning over them with ominous weight. The bald giant of the Enro clan stood there, smirked, and boldly claimed the fair's security was their territory. He leaned in and promised to unleash dirty rumors unless he got the secret plans handed over. Huiyan brushed off the threat as childish, yet it still hit hard, because chasing after rumors was the last headache he could afford right now. Everything snapped, just like that. Between them, Ye Hoyang loomed, like a wall made of destiny. He cut him off with a chilling, no-nonsense snap. "The Koichiju clan's affairs? That's none of our business, Shinro." His eyes suddenly turned cold as he snapped. "So you're really choosing to spit on the entire Ye clan? Then are you ready for what comes next?" The big guy went pale in a heartbeat, and cold sweat poured down his face. He clenched his teeth so hard he felt helpless. The Shinro people bolted backward, and Huiyan leaned into Jansu with a smirk, claiming he'd barely shaken off those pesky spies. But the moment those words landed, cold, icy rage flooded his face. He said he pressed down with such force that they couldn't slip back in and get in the way anymore. Intrigued, Jansu pressed them for the real plan, and the three of them shoved into a tight huddle, ready to plot. After hearing the plan, Huiyan grunted, satisfaction lighting up his face. And Jansu grinned and happily latched onto the idea. A ruthless, predatory spark ignited in Huiyan's eyes. He swore they were in for an amazing time. The loud city fair shoved them into a sea of people and non-stop chaos the moment they arrived. Jansu scowled at the racket, while Huiyan scanned the crowd with his eyes, hunting down salt merchants. He knew they always claimed the loudest, most packed corner of the market. Huiyan openly reveled in the walk. He flat-out ignored Jansu's grumbling, acting like he'd never even hear the guy complaining about pretending to be the manager. At last, they slammed into their destination. Salt mountains loomed ahead like living giants, and that's where the local kings of trade ruled their gritty kingdom. Kang Sun, the smug merchant himself, stepped up and greeted them like he already owned the moment. He greeted them with sharp, sarcastic words, calling them the heroes of the Udon sect. He whipped up fake shock. Why were those honorable guests coming straight to him, in person? Jansu didn't waste a second beating around the bush. He flat out said they'd come for salt. Kan-sun crossed his arms over his chest like he was bracing for impact. He snapped off the deal and swore he wouldn't drop a single copper coin from the price. And with a sharp, sneering tone, he added, mocking right to the bone, now they'd be forced to cough up even more money. Chun-Su shot back coolly that they'd snatch the goods for a measly pittance anyway. These words left the merchant utterly baffled. Huion lunged forward. He made it crystal clear, nobody in this world hands out anything for free. And he slammed into the one weakness everyone missed. So they're really about to scrap the catch-and-pop law soon, right? With a death grip, he yanked Kan-sun by the collar, eyes blazing, and roared that once the law was repealed, the price of salt would drop by half. Huion snapped at the merchant, calling him a lowlife who was trying to scam the mighty Udon sect like an easy sucker. The trader shoved the young man back hard. He squirmed and insisted, trembling, that it was just Beijing gossip, nothing more. He refused to back down. As long as the law keeps standing, his prices stay painfully fair. Huion had no choice. He had to swallow the truth and admit what was right in front of him. The merchant sells for the true market price and cuts no corners. He's squeaky clean. After slipping a psychological edge, Kan-sun's confidence exploded, and he got way bolder. Even the mighty Udon sect will have to face the emperor and take their beating for spreading those vicious rumors. Huion and Chun-Su finally clocked the dead end, spun around, and stormed out. On the way, Chun-Su snapped with rage, demanding to know why this circus was happening. He couldn't wrap his head around his partner's logic. Why did Huion back off from that merchant and let him stay in the honest seller role instead of squeezing answers out of him all the way? The young man sat there, unshaken, and calmly laid out his plan like it was already winning. He just stacked the odds so future auctions would practically beg the merchant to deal with them directly. He couldn't stomach that twisted logic for another second. Chun-Su smashed a brutal punch straight into his face. Later, with rage burning inside him, Chun-Su downed alcohol and called him a cunning puppy. And Huion calmly chomped down on a dumpling. When they asked what Huion would do next, he cut in fast. No grand plan, just this. The fair still has 4 days left, so they're stuck waiting it out. Chun-Su snapped, annoyed and impatient, demanding to know what they were planning to do for all this time. He couldn't shake the feeling this was another trick, and it was coming fast. Huion suddenly lit up with joy and thrust his fingers straight at the stall. He asked for candied fruits right then and there. Chun-Su snapped his eyes shut. His fist shook with a brutal, inhuman urge to slam that insolent guy straight into the wall. The boy ran his fingers over the fabric. He snatched the local administrator's quality certificate and checked it over. In the end, the quality absolutely blew me away. Top tier, no question. He shoved the scroll back into the merchant's hands and hurried over to check out the other stalls. And the sect leader eyed his every move like something was about to go horribly wrong. The elder couldn't take it anymore and snapped, asking how much longer they were going to keep wandering that market. The boy flashed a sly little smile. He demanded to know if he truly saw nothing at all. He broke it all down. This is exactly what it's about. Sisa, the local administrator, snapped into action and meticulously sorted every single item. The absolute best stood right in the middle, while the worst got pushed out to the edges. Usually, a merchant could snap up the best spot with a bribe. But once they got here, the whole world felt flipped upside down. While he stared at the weapon racks, the boy clocked it instantly. Sisa couldn't be bought, and he knew every last piece like the back of his hand. He yanked one of his swords free and, with a reckless grin, told the elder to loosen up. The moment I heard this was the deposit meant to lock in a future salt purchase. The leader grudgingly tossed him a handful of coins. With a satisfied grin, the boy clutched the purchase to his chest like it meant everything. He spun around to face his companion. He was dead sure of it. The administrator in this place was the real deal, honest, sharp, and fully on top of things. But right beside that first-class sword, the same stall was stuffed with blatant junk. The leader snapped, "Why are you bleeding so many losses?" And the boy flashed an even bigger grin, like he had a secret about to blow up. The answer blindsided everyone, hitting out of nowhere. The whole mystery hinged on the blacksmith who forged this blade. The elder leaned in and inspected the hilt with sharp, unblinking focus. The metal gleamed as it was carved with the name Li Wei-zun. He was a legendary Beijing master. And then the kid dropped a tiny detail from his own biography. That tiny detail ended up being the whole key. The blacksmith? He was born right here, straight out of Yichang. Local merchants shamelessly exploited a secret favor meant for their fellow countryman, the administrator. The leader let out a heavy sigh, finally getting what honesty really meant. And then the boy chimed in. Why not gift it with the blade? Sisa knows weapons inside out, and she's got nothing but respect for that famous fellow countryman. The boy grinned and blurted that with this sword they'd pay a bribe, only for the leader to turn scarlet at the Udon sect's morals. But the elder had no choice. He had to face the truth. This young guy's got a real gift for trading, like it's second nature to him. Later, inside a lavish hall, Sisa herself stepped forward and warmly greeted the Udon Pavilion's leader. When Li Wei-zun's blade came into view, the administrator nearly dropped it from pure electric excitement. At the table, he poured out his thanks for the precious gift, but the boy just waved it away and called it a mere trifle. He snapped into action and went straight for the goal. The talk suddenly slammed into one thing everyone cared about: current salt prices. Sisa made it crystal clear he already knew all about the abolition of the salt monopoly. The administrator leaned in and told the guests straight up that he'd already warned the local brokers about everything. He swore every one of these local brokers is born and bred here and stays loyal to Ichon, so no outsider is going to waltz in and smash the market. The boy flashed a confident grin, like he already knew he'd win. The Udon sect can stay ice-cold and totally unshaken. He broke down exactly how intermediaries fit into the whole scheme. It was the brokers who ironed out every clash between the traders of the Central Plains, different accents, mismatched customs, and even the weight units everyone swore by. Sisa stood tall and proud, as if the world had just bowed to her. Competitors from Shanxi can't buy him off with bribes. Right then, a soft knock landed on the door, like a warning. A servant burst into the room and spilled a juicy scandal from the market. The administrator bolted out right away to fix everything. The door slammed shut behind him. The leaders snapped around at him, pure anger blazing in their eyes. They'd already decided no one was going to say the monopoly out loud. The boy squinted like he was hiding something. He didn't come out and say it. He let the message land through sneakier, indirect hints. Dozens of ordinary folks from the Udon sect fanned out and took jobs in all kinds of trade guilds. One casual rumor hit the air, and boom, every single one of them snapped to attention at once. It instantly snatched the broker's attention. The boy sipped his tea like nothing was wrong, muttering that he should have spent that money on food instead of wasting it on a bribe. Suddenly the whole world went dead quiet. A thunderous rumble blasted from outside. They stepped out onto the porch, and the leader couldn't resist a sharp, sarcastic jab, saying their brilliant plan had already blown up. Something felt horribly off. The boy burst into the yard, completely lost and baffled. He squinted hard, eyes locked on the figure that was wrecking the peace. The leader instantly clocked the troublemaker as a righteous faction guy, yet the man still looked like a full-on bandit. The boy stammered out, totally baffled, that the face felt painfully familiar, like he'd seen it 1,000 times. A hulking, bald strongman towered over the scared administrator, looming like a nightmare. Sagon Hyun. Boom! There he is. One of the companions shot the stranger a quick look and murmured that he looked just like someone from the righteous faction. The fair administrator snapped tense the moment he recognized the familiar face. The bald, strong man, Sa Gon-hyun, surged forward with a terrifying, no-nonsense threat. He threw the blame at them, claiming they kept barging into his business. Muk Hui-yun watched in total silence, eyes sharp and unmoving. He understood that prince of the merchant's son inside and out, every quirk, every motive, perfectly. He wasn't about to let this slide. The furious merchant from Shaanxi exploded into furious shouts, demanding to know the limit right now. The administrator stayed cool and calmly pressed the merchant again, demanding to know what on earth he was even talking about. Rage boiled in him when brokers blocked their chance to trade, handing the advantage to locals instead. The merchant shook with fury and threw out a blunt warning about what would happen next. The administrator answered with nothing but a crooked little smile. A man from Shaanxi boasted that he had top connections with the officials. He threatened to wipe the middlemen out for good. Muk Hui-yun snapped in and cut him off mid-sentence. The young man thrust himself forward. He straight up demanded to know if the local traders would end up taking the hit and losing big. A sly, cunning grin spread across his face. The merchant stared at him, eyes wide with sheer shock. This is the Udan disciple who swore he'd grab all the salt for a measly pittance. Hui-yun kept his cool and answered like it was no big deal. This sect has zero to do with it. He talks just like any regular merchant. He blasted Shaanxi for trying to wreck Yicheng's merchants, pointing to Beijing-sourced info as proof. Sa Gon-hyun slammed a heavy hand on his raging companion's shoulder, pushing him to swallow the anger before it blew. The bald man spoke cool as ice and reminded everyone that merchants settle their fights by their own rules. He slapped his palm onto the guy's shoulder. He leaned in and told his partner to stay ice cold and keep their head. Sa Gon-hyun flashed a grin that hit like a spark. He stepped forward and dropped a brand new proposal. The idea just lingered in the air like a loaded weapon, an indirect clash waiting to explode. Those terms were totally okay. Muk Hui-yun didn't hesitate for a second. He agreed on the spot to start right now. The administrator snapped his eyes open in shock. And that's exactly how life played out in this world. When it came time to judge who was righteous and who was guilty, nobody bothered with questions. Disputes got settled with raw, brutal force. So tell me, what do merchants use to measure everything? Of course, money does the talking. The rich didn't lift a finger. They hired the best guards in town and sent them to do the fighting for them. Hui-yun slammed his empty wallet into view and shook it like proof of his failure. Not a single copper coin sat in his pockets. The enemies hissed to each other, grinning like they'd already won, because they were sure that lowly lay disciple couldn't beg his own sect for help. The administrator wanted no part of it either. Staying out of it was the only move. He shot him a warning right away. Don't you dare count on me. The Udan sect never lifted a finger to meddle in the world below. A merchant from Shaanxi smirked with pure disgust, like something in the world had offended him personally. He'd already locked in a fighter for this match. Sa Gon-hyun cracked his knuckles with a loud, satisfying crunch. Anxious, the administrator urged Hui-yun to hunt for a replacement time, but Hui-yun shut it down, straight up refused. Hui-yun surged forward. He flashed his badge as an independent trader, then decided to take the fight into his own hands. The bald man bared his teeth and grinned like he meant to cause trouble. For years, he'd been dreaming of shattering his own spirit. The young man didn't flinch, no fear, no doubt, just pure steel. Muk Hui-yun taunted him and snapped his finger, beckoning him like he was nothing. Without warning, Sa Gon-hyun whipped around and spotted the person in the crowd instantly. Hong Mun-hak, the pavilion's boss, came charging toward them. A grim shadow hung over the man's face. Han lunged to step in, but Hui-yun grabbed him and told him to spare his strength. This was too small to waste it on. Sa Gon-hyun burst into laughter. In the end, His chi was so rare, it might as well have been cat tears, practically non-existent. The young man snapped his head back, like something just yanked the air out of his lungs. And he spat out a mocking line, like the enemy wasn't strong, just terrified. The administrator panicked because the Shinro sect's senior follower wouldn't budge, not even to ordinary attacks. Huiyan smirked like he already won. This fool had no chance against him. The administrator could only slump in defeat and let out a weary sigh. He blared out the rules like they were law. The loser drops to their knees and obeys the victor. No arguments, no doubts. If Sa Gon-hyun wins, Shan Shi will make the trade. No brokers, no delays. If Muk Huiyan takes the win, every local directive gets obeyed, no questions asked. A battle signal blasted through the air, screaming for war. Kvian shot forward like lightning. He rocketed toward the enemy like a bolt of lightning. He set his sights on ending it all with a single, deadly strike. Every ounce of his strength slammed into his fist. Then, boom, the bald man snatched a massive two-handed sword out of nowhere. This slammed him on the brakes so hard, his momentum vanished in an instant. Kvian snapped with furious outrage, screaming that this was straight-up cheating. The big guy burst out laughing and snapped back that nobody had banned weapons. Then he swung down hard and slammed the ground. He thrust the weapon up in front of him. He swore he'd swing with the flat side only, so he wouldn't ever end his opponent's life. And just like that, they dangled a weapon in front of him and offered it up. But Kvian only grimaced, still completely clueless on how to use it. The enemy crashed forward, swinging with everything they had. A giant blade screamed through the air, carving away mere millimeters from the young man's skin. The sword slammed into the ground with a violent jolt. With a crushing strike, the stone slabs exploded into a storm of shattered pieces. The Shanxi merchant burst out laughing with joy, yelling for the boy's bones to be smashed. The administrator jolted into panic and pleaded for them to stop the beating right now. But Han Mun-hak shot back calmly, because stopping now would spell their defeat. He pointed out that this boy isn't just anyone, he's a disciple of the legendary Wudang sect. The crowd stopped breathing, hanging on every second. Han was certain this story wouldn't just fizzle out like that. Sa Gon-hyun snapped his arm out and swung again. He slammed the sword down right where the young man had just been standing. Breathing like his lungs were on fire, the bald man finally slammed to a stop. He snapped at him like, "You're nothing but a rat, always bolting the moment trouble shows up." Huiyan froze mid-step and blinked hard, stunned by what he'd just seen. With a sharp smirk, he reminded everyone that he'd only been studying martial arts for under a year, and that giant brute still hadn't landed a single hit on him. Even in his own head, the kid admitted it, dodging was pure misery. He knew exactly what he had in his favor. With his nimble footing gone, he'd have folded long ago, straight back in the last exam. But now, everything had flipped upside down. Shinro, the pavilion's head, barked at his fighter to stay sharp and hold it together. But then it all snapped. He finally lost his mind. With a savage roar, Sa Gon-hyun came swinging. He threw every ounce of strength into a thunderous horizontal sword strike. Huiyan's eyes flared with dangerous intent. Now it was time to put the skill he just paid for, 2 whole silver coins, to the ultimate test. The strong body skill of the 8th level fired up and came alive. The young warrior slammed a steel blade straight into his bare forearm, taking the impact head-on. With a savage crack, the swordsman's recoil slammed him backward, and his own hilt smashed into his face with brutal force. Sa Gon-hyun crumpled onto his back, weapon clattering out of his grip, as helplessness swallowed him whole. Huiyan flicked the smoke away with his uninjured hand. Now those opponents stood in his way, but they couldn't scare him for a second. The clash finally ended. The administrator threw the youth's hand up high in victory, standing over the enemy's unconscious body. The deal got forged in crimson. Blood sealed it. From this day on, the merchants of Shanxi had to cough up what was demanded. A few days later, everything shifted. Mukhui-yon and the administrator sprinted back to report that the salt deal hit a bullseye. The elder couldn't believe what he just heard. It absolutely blew past every expectation. The kid didn't just finish the job, he also hauled the sect out by saving a massive 300 silver coins. Elder Udon stared at the youth, completely stunned. He stared at it, refusing to believe his own eyes. He couldn't even dream that the merchants would hand him deals this good. Huion laid out his secret method with a sly grin, like he already knew you'd fall for it. He boxed them in, and they caved, handing over the goods for crumbs. And just like that, a massive haul of 300 silver coins got saved. No way anyone could ignore it. The elder, finally pleased, slid the boy his rightful share, 15 shining silver coins. Huion snatched a jingling pouch and greedily pressed his lips to it. But the money meant almost nothing. What really hit the elder was seeing the boy beat a tough opponent, especially since he'd only joined the order less than a year ago. An apprentice nearby snapped his eyes wide, totally stunned, already guessing what this was all about. With a heavy, solemn voice, the elder declared, "Starting today, Huion is promoted to an inner apprentice." An honor like this had never been heard of before. For 50 straight years, regular people hadn't gotten a promotion like this. Huion quietly dipped his head like he was swallowing a storm. Then, out of nowhere, he dropped to a bow like the moment had flipped his world upside down. He demanded they grant one of his requests. "Please keep me out of the sect, and don't crack my dantien." He blurted it out with zero joking, dead serious. Dead silence slammed down like a blanket. The elder snapped his eyes open. He wrestled with the sheer madness of everything he'd just heard. His older brother swallowed hard, and a cold sweat erupted across his skin. When someone pressed Huion with that razor-sharp question, why, he didn't flinch. He calmly said he just wanted to make money. "I'm in love with money," the young man bragged, standing tall like he owned the whole world. The old man slapped his own forehead with his hand. The boy had already cracked the sect's secret steps. No clan on earth just shrugs and lets their martial arts bearer go, because when someone runs, the usual punishment is straight up having their legs cut off. The elder drummed his fingers on the table, stunned by the sheer audacity of this straight-up honesty, something he'd never heard in his life. Then he snapped still, like the world had paused. Then it hit him. An idea for a compromise snapped into place. He leaned in and offered the young man a deal. Become an enrolled lay disciple. The proposal felt completely off, like something was terribly wrong. Huion tilted his head, completely baffled. The elder leaned in and spilled the real essence. "It's an ancient ritual of the sect. Right when the fighter's name gets carved into a special register, the boy would stay a layman in name, but he'd still get every perk that an internal disciple earned. The ritual didn't just start. It had ancient roots that dug deep into history. Back then, it was the secret weapon used to crank up combat power fast during the war against the demonic cult. Back then, the sects were running on empty, no gifted warriors to be found. Huion shot a skeptical glare. That war was 100 years ago. What's it even going to do for me now? The elder narrowed his eyes with pure, crafty suspicion. That young man is finally about to unlock the real martial arts of Udon and study them freely, no limits. At the same time, nobody can shove him into doing the sect's duties. The boy fixed his gaze on the master, like he was trying to read the truth straight out of him. He finally saw just how huge the offer really was. He'll step onto the street and run his trade business with icy calm. The future looked downright unreal. He wanted to throw the order's loud name over his shady business like a smokescreen. And trust me, there's way more where that came from. At the same time, seize total freedom and soak in pure gold. Right away, imagination started sketching a carefree, rich life, while Hui Yan just sat there, calmly chewing on his own finger. A sly, toothy grin cracked across his face like a trap snapping shut. "I'm in," he shouted, joy bursting out of him as he clenched his fist like he'd just won. But the elder yanked him out of the heavens and slammed him down onto the earth. "The Council of Elders won't, no way, approve any precedent like this." He shot up 3 fingers. The boy has only 3 months left. The conditions were brutally unforgiving, like the world was trying to break them. Now every top member of the order is going to slam the vote against them, no question. The mission was crystal clear. Hui Yan has to whip up a convincing reason strong enough to make them change their minds. When they asked, "What if it doesn't work?" the old man snapped back with the coldest, harshest answer he could manage. The decision was crystal clear. Either he gets swallowed into the ranks as a plain old internal disciple, or his dantian gets shattered and he's kicked out for good. The very next day, at the training grounds, that brand new mentor was already there, smiling warmly like they'd been expecting him. Finally, the master broke into a smile. He beamed with excitement and praised Hui Yan for the deadly martial arts talent he kept hidden. Even then the young man couldn't sit still. Restlessness gnawed at him. Breath tearing through his chest, he dropped into a squat and heaved a massive boulder on his shoulders. After 20 brutal reps, he groaned through clenched teeth and let the stone crash to the ground. The mentor nearly couldn't believe it. This rookie's body adjusted to the training loads at lightning speed. He lunged for the wooden sword, while the boy gasped for air. Hui Yan stared in silence, eyes blazing as his mind raced. Proving himself to the elders won't be solved by endurance alone. He's got to prove more than that. The ending crushed him, and the truth hit like a punch to the gut. Nobody cares about his financial genius, so he'll have to prove his worth the hard way, in battle. But there was a huge problem, and it hit like a brick wall. But what do you do when he's just starting to get a real feel for the blade? Udan was famous for one thing above all, its unstoppable swordsman. Finally, he clenched the training sword in a death grip, ready to uncover the big mysteries waiting ahead. The mentor snapped, swung his weapon straight into his head, and barked, "Stop daydreaming!" With a calm, matter-of-fact voice, he declared, "I'll teach you the triple mastery, cheap little tricks you can buy for 3 coppers at any market." Hui Yan shot the teacher a look full of disappointment. He couldn't figure out what the real catch even was. The mentor snapped up a finger, cutting off his indignation mid-breath. "I'm not giving you the answer. Figure out the difference yourself, because you'll only truly get it by seeing it." He grinned in a way that sent shivers down your spine. The boy let out a sharp, irritated sigh, like he couldn't stand another second of it. He was sick to death of those same old vague wisdom lines. When his mentor grilled him about whether he even knew the basics of this style, Hui Yan gave a dry, no-nonsense confirmation. He unleashed 3 killer techniques. A vertical smash crashes down, a diagonal storm of lunges whips through the air, and then a brutal horizontal sweep sends the whole crowd tumbling. The mentor snarled, right through his teeth. "Now that the theory's nailed, it's time to throw you into real, hard practice." It all kicked off the moment Triple Mastery's special technique lit the fuse. When the boy got hit with the order to slash with his sword 10,000 times, pure indignation burst out of him. Then his mentor snapped him down hard, saying every internal student goes through the same thing. The teacher told everyone, "Slow down, don't sprint through it. Just hit your daily quota and finish strong." With those words, he shot up into the sky in a blur. The young man got dumped on his own, staring after him in total disbelief. He paused for a beat, scratched the back of his head, and chose to flip the switch to something positive. He clenched the wooden sword's hilt even harder, ready to snap into a fast swing and clear his quota. A massive swing tore through the air. The blade tore through the air with a sharp whistle, and a control panel lit up in front of his eyes. The counter sat at 0 out of 10,000, and the young man snapped into grim despair. He screamed in his mind that he'd grind this cursed number for the rest of his life. The wooden sword snapped back off the stone slabs with a hollow thud. The young man crumpled onto the ground, gasping for air like it was slipping away. Only now did it hit him. Boring work wasn't pointless at all. It took real skill to pull it off. Trying to nail the simplest move just once was easy, until you had to repeat it 10,000 times, and suddenly it felt like pure torture. His body refused to cooperate. Every movement stayed stiff, and his stance looked downright awkward. The system handed him just 2 bare-bones skills, and when it came time to fence, those tricks did absolutely nothing. Suddenly, a fresh window exploded onto his screen, right in front of his eyes. A special mission hit him like a thunderclap. Grind the stance 1,000 times and score sword mastery for half the price. He remembered the brutal grind it took to win those 15 silver at the fair, and a heavy sigh tore out of him. He had to cough up 2/3 of his savings, but the instant he triggered the skill, the next strike screamed through the air with an insane, never-seen-before punch. Now there were just 1,000 precision strikes left. He dug in and forced himself to meet the system's demand, and then new knowledge came flooding into his muscles like it had a pulse. The new horizontal strike detonated a brutal wall of wind. Even at the very bottom of mastery, the gap was absolutely enormous. The terrifying thought of swinging that sword 10,000 more times still clung to him like a dark curse. From the roof behind him, his mentor quietly kept his eyes locked on him. The teacher loomed at the edge of the tile, hands locked behind his back like he was about to drop a verdict. He let out a heavy sigh, already convinced the student was messing around again instead of training. The mentor narrowed his eyes, then cracked a grin. Now he was trying to figure out what on earth to do with a student like that. A golden screensaver lit up the screen, flashing the title of the work like it owned the room. "Enough," the mentor snapped, and stormed down into the yard. He clocked that even though the student looked weak with his sword, he should have understood by now, and that was a blatant overstep. The young man spun around, baffled, because it hit him. Someone had been watching him the whole time. He snapped at the boy for treating training like a joke, warning that if he kept that attitude, he'd never make it into the competition certification. The moment the young man heard that strange word, his ears snapped to attention like they'd been pulled by a magnet. A sly grin tugged at the teacher's lips, like he'd just found the perfect plan. He broke it down like this. It was a friendly duel between third-generation students, just a test to see who truly had the skills. The mentor shot a sly glance at the student and asked, like it was a secret, if he wanted to step up and show what he had. The boy snapped still, stunned beyond words. Then he joyfully lifted his sword, shouting that he couldn't wait a second longer. The mentor said the sect's elders would watch the duels themselves, up close and personal. His eyes flared with a hunger for glory. This was the exact moment to prove he had what it takes. He clenched his fist and swore he'd join. Then the teacher shut him down on the spot. No way. The student barked in outrage, demanding to know if this was really because of his age. The mentor swung a sword and smashed his forehead hard, roaring at him to shut up and stop spouting nonsense. He warned that if the boy didn't master the triple mastery, the whole sect would end up laughing at him. With a bruised hand clutched to his aching head, the young man asked in a cautious whisper when the tournament would finally happen. Hearing "in a month" hit him like a curse. His face went deathly pale. 10,000 strikes in that tiny span felt like an impossible weight crushing him from every side. The boy's shoulders stiffened, and he couldn't shake the fear that time might run out before he ever reached a level worthy of him. The teacher studied her protege in silence, clocking every move like it mattered. He realized the boy's whole power lives or dies by his mood. He'd nail a flawless vertical strike, and the next second, he'd fumble it with the most foolish clumsiness. The mentor realized something chilling. If he left the student alone for even a moment, he'd stumble straight onto the wrong path. Then, without warning, he slammed the sword hilt into his back. He barked for him to focus, drowning out the boy's furious protests. His mentor stepped in and personally adjusted his stance. He grabbed him and made him spread his legs wider so he could stay steady. Then he barked, "Grip the weapon tight and land the hit." The blade tore through the air, carving out a blazing streak behind it like lightning. The boy froze in place, staring at what he just pulled off, shocked by his own crushing power. It hit a whole new level, like the weapon finally became a part of my soul. The teacher asked him, cool as ice, what he thought about the results. The young man stared at the sword in his hands, totally stunned. The mentor smirked and goaded him. Did he really still want to swing that blade by himself? The boy scowled, furious that the hit had bruised his pride. But when the master was right, he had to swallow his pride and grudgingly accept his guidance. A whole month ripped by in the blink of an eye. The young man finally sank to the floor, smiling in relief after blowing through his exhausting training. The teacher strode up to him, grinning at how good his mood was. The boy tried to plead for a full hour off. The mentor shoved him into action and made him lift his sword at once. If there's enough strength to keep talking, there's enough strength to swing. The young man secretly watched the teacher, keeping his face calm like a perfect student. For 5 straight days, he stayed glued to him, like he had no other students at all. The boy couldn't help wondering, was the master just squeezing every last drop of value from him? Or was there some secret motive lurking behind it all? The teacher's stern voice snapped him out of his head, like someone yanked the plug on his thoughts. The young man let out a deep sigh and admitted, straight up, that he only truly found the path of the sword because of his mentor. He planted his foot into a solid stance, clamped his hand on the hilt, and got ready to strike. The teacher leaned in, squinting hard like he was trying to catch a secret hiding in plain sight. The boy hoisted the blade over his head, ready to strike. He swore he'd finally show what his hard work had produced. A thunderous surge ripped through the air like the world had just snapped. He kicked up a massive cloud of dust. The young man's gaze sharpened like a blade, cutting straight through the moment. He launched straight into a relentless combo of strikes. Every single swing landed perfectly, blazing fast and laser-precise. The sword suddenly tore forward, slicing through the air at full speed. Fresh blasts of air blasted out from the swinging seats, slicing through the space around them. The boy finally stopped and let out a heavy, rattling breath. He lowered his sword inch by inch, then seized the hilt again with pure, unshakable confidence. A confident smile burst across his face like he owned the moment. The teacher stared him down with a face so unreadable it felt like a locked door. They stood there, silent and locked in place, staring each other down right in the middle of the yard. Cracked by the brutal silence, the boy blurted out, all confused, "So, you've really got nothing to say, mentor?" The teacher gave a quiet snort, like it slipped out before they could stop it, and finally burst into laughter, admitting the technique had gotten seriously good. He said it with real warmth. The young man had changed for good. Now he worked hard without anyone hovering over him. The boy shot his gaze to the side, blushing as he admitted he'd supposedly just had an epiphany. He demanded to know if his current level would be enough to step into the tournament. The teacher smirked and dropped the final test like a challenge. It sounded easy. Just stop 10 deadly strikes. But the mentor's chilling joy flared as he snatched a skinny twig off the ground and announced he'd fight with it. Manhwa flashed a grin, snatched up the skinny twig, and declared he'd beat his enemy with it. He stood right in the middle of the yard, lowered his weapon with reckless ease, and dared someone to come at him. Lunge! The young fighter burst forward and slammed straight into the attack. He poured every ounce of strength into that first crushing strike. Wood slammed into the branch, and a bright flash exploded like a tiny firework. but the mentor slid the thrust aside with ease and sprang back in the next breath. The boy slammed the button again. He ripped into them with a furious streak of rapid, hard-hitting blows. Manhwa kept his cool and methodically counted every single attack. The youth clenched his teeth and prayed for mercy. But one tiny slip now, and it was all over. He'd be done for. A wooden sword and a fragile branch slammed together with furious, blazing speed. The old master executed flawless moves with absolute control. A diagonal slash tore through the air, a brutal sweep knocked them down, and then a crushing vertical strike finished the job. He exploded upward into the air in a sharp burst. He was testing whether the student had truly mastered the triple mastery stances. The last Delta 10th strike, right on the edge. He shot a sly smile and warned him in one breath. A sharp branch tore through the air, slicing with a savage whistle. It was surging, stronger by the second. The boy braced himself, like the next second was about to change everything. Then a sudden chill snapped into the mentor's eyes like lightning. At the very last second, he dirty shifted his stance. A brutal surge of energy slammed into the student and hurled him backward. On every single page spread, the chapter title splash hits first, logo blazing, author signatures inked proudly, setting the whole story's tone before anything even starts. The dust kicked up by that devastating hit slowly drifted away, revealing what it had left behind. Tension snapped through the air like a live wire. In the master's grip, the branch finally gave up and shattered into two. The boy could barely keep himself upright, shaking with exhaustion, but he clenched his will and somehow held his balance. Manhwa shot a quick glance and basically admitted the obvious. If that branch had been a real sword instead, everything could have swung in a completely different direction. But then he crushed those hopes on the spot, saying that the trial being passed still wasn't enough. The elder carelessly flung the branch fragment aside. Only the internal students get to compete. He delivered the final blow to the young man. The news hit him like a punch to the gut. The boy went rigid on the spot, words hitting him like a sudden punch. They charged to the arena stands, where the student sat there, seething with hurt and rage. His brutal training finally met its match. Unyielding rules slammed down like a wall he couldn't break. Manhwa couldn't let him forget it. Being a lay student slammed the door shut on the tournament. The boy shot him a furious glare, thinking he was nothing but a loudmouth. "Then why are we even here?" he snapped, staring at that empty ring like it was daring him. The mentor shot back that the student is massively underestimating the Udon sect's third generation. The young man jerked backward in a sudden snapping motion. He was 100% sure he could handle anything. No doubts, no hesitation, just pure confidence in his power. Their heated argument got ripped apart by the sudden, brutal clanging of weapons. Manhwa was commanded to stare down the arena. The arena erupted in a full-blown fight, pure chaos swallowing every inch of the stage. Myeon-il, this third generation's biggest hope, threw herself into the fight with everything she had. A single, pinpoint strike. And then his opponent got launched helplessly out of the circle. The fallen foe's body hit the stones with a dull thud, dead and defeated. The mentor leaned in and told him this brutal fighter wasn't just trained by the sect, he was taught by the sect's own leader himself. Myeon-il calmly, cold-bloodedly dropped his training sword like it was nothing. His name blasted onto the bulletin board, crowned the absolute winner of the tournament. The boy stared in silence, like he was daring the world to move first. He reluctantly admitted the favorite was undeniably skilled. He took a hard, sober look at the massive chasm separating them. Chasing down that kind of level wouldn't just take effort, it would grind you into the dirt for years. If the sect already has a genius like that, then why are the elders wasting time on him at all? The young man scratched his chin, frowning hard, because he couldn't make heads or tails of this system of lay disciples. Manhwa paused for impact and laid down the rule. If you want recognition, you've got to beat someone at Il's level. The boy let out a heavy sigh and finally accepted that hope was gone for good. He pressed his mentor for answers, demanding to know how he ever uncovered those secret rules. The elder spun away without a word, burying his face in the darkness like it could swallow his secrets. Manhwa spun toward the student and snapped, "So you really thought I wouldn't find out?" Turns out that so-called special status wasn't some grand tradition at all. It was just the sect leader's whim, straight from his own head. Manhwa rubbed his forehead with tired, shaking hands. He'd bend rules for real talent, but reality doesn't care, so you can't fight it. With your skills right now, you're never going to beat Il. He snapped his sentence off mid-word. You can't even beat Il, and the elders won't bend the rules for you, not even once. The student slowly lowered his gaze, silent as stone. He asked what to do next, but the student's face fell as they said there was only one move left. The boy slammed his fist against his chest, refusing to back down. I'll paralyze my dantian, and then I have to leave the sect. He spit out the cruel final blow. Manhwa let out a heavy breath, convinced the disciple had finally thrown in the towel. But the young man lunged in and cut them off with a no-nonsense decision. He's not about to fold and hand over his powers. He's fighting to the end. He shot it out straight, no beating around the bush. For a merchant, money isn't just important, it's life itself, like rice in your bowl and water in your cup. With a crooked grin, he slowly reached out his hand. So fork over my 100 copper coins right now. Huion shot out his open palm, daring the world to react. With a grin, he pointed out the 100 copper coins he'd stashed away for safekeeping. And he demanded they come back. He sat in the yard and pored over the scroll, absorbing every combat move like it might save his life. The boy crunched the numbers and swallowed hard. He only had 6 measly silver coins left. The sect leader's 10 coins didn't sit around. They got poured straight into skills. And then they started collecting the rest, piece by piece, until nothing was left behind. They needed way more muscle than hundreds of coppers, because that still wouldn't buy even 1 silver, and to take down Il, they had to unleash a deadly, secret weapon. Huion let out a heavy sigh. A good skill cost a fortune, and any bargain skill was basically worthless. Out of nowhere, a heavy pouch plummeted straight into his hands. The elder spoke in a calm voice and said, "These are the exact 100 coppers. Everything else is just storage fees." Huion gawked at the treasure, utterly stunned. He had no clue where these wild fees came from, but somehow they were handing him an entire mountain of silver. The elder's voice cut through the room as he warned brutally about what was at stake. If he didn't act, Huionu couldn't beat Ilya, his dantian would get smashed, and he'd get kicked out of Mount Udon for good. Turns out, guilt hit that man like a wrecking ball. He'd pulled the kid into the sect, and now he was hunting for a way to repay him for it. Inside the pouch sat 100 silver coins, enough riches to make anyone's jaw drop. The old master urged him to use it as his starting capital. He flashed a warm smile and confessed that every last bit of it was his savings. On his journey, he kept stepping in to help people, and year after year, their heartfelt gratitude piled up as cash in his hands. And now he finally cracked. He found the perfect reason to drop this crushing burden for good. Huionu yanked the pouch shut and tied the strings tight. He stiffened into cold control, tucked the money away, and flatly declared he'd give back nothing ever again. The elder leaned in with sharp curiosity, asking the boy if that wealth had suddenly flooded him with strength. Huion snarled like a cornered beast, pure rage spitting from his teeth. He shot back, grinning. "I'm stronger than a tiger now." Several days blasted by in the blink of an eye. He bolted forward like something was chasing him. The strike tore through the air like a flash of lightning. He slammed forward and kept the assault going. The wooden mannequin rattled and shuddered under wave after wave of brutal, thunderous punches. Mion sharpened every slash with a training sword until his movements felt razor-precise. Just as he got going, slow applause suddenly cut him off. Huion leapt onto the platform. He couldn't help it. He praised his opponent's skills. Then, with pure disdain, they labeled him a lowly layman student like it was a stage show. Mion-il corrected him with ice-cold precision, and he ordered him to get lost, no debate, no delays. Huion smirked and basically dared everyone to believe he was just quietly accepting defeat. He burst into loud, dramatic laughter, thanking his opponent for handing him such an easy win. This sent the opponent gripping the sword hilt so hard it cracked. Huion leaned in, smirked, and taunted them with the huge gap between their ages. He just fired off another razor-sharp barb. He swore he'd never let anyone see how terrified he really was. Couldn't take it anymore. Mion-il spun toward the mentor and blurted out a demand. "Judge our duel." In the arena, they stared each other down, ready to clash. Rage boiled in Mion-il's chest as he vowed that the insolent fool would regret it. And Huion just grinned with total confidence. Then the moment everything hinges on finally hit. The judge pressed them once more, demanding to know if they were truly ready. Tension snapped tighter in the air. Mion-il dropped into a ferocious fighting stance. The order to begin ripped through the air, and everything kicked off. The alarm blared like a judge's gavel, and the signal finally hit. The fighters exploded from their spots and crashed blades together in a split second. He rocketed backward from that hit, flying off like a comet thrown by pure impact. Mion-il dropped down with a soft thud, landing clean on his feet. He clamped down on the sword even harder. The very next second, he unleashed a lightning-fast strike. Huion got shoved into a crushing, no-room-to-breathe defensive stance. The boy barely held back a simple pressure that hit way harder than it should have. His speed advantage was slipping out of his hands. Huion smirked with pure, calculated mischief. Mion-il started matching his moves perfectly. He had zero idea the opponent was secretly holding back his real power on purpose. While Huion fought on, a dangerous plan, powered by a brand-new skill, started taking shape in his head. That plan was pure audacity, like daring the world to stop it. He wanted to baffle the enemy, so he threw caution to the wind and gambled everything. He dared. The moment those 100 gifted silver coins hit his hands, he slammed every last one straight into buying that skill. Jumping back, Huion pulled every last ounce of strength into himself, like he was saving the world with his breath. He braced himself, ready to unleash a devastating attack. Then, out of nowhere, a system message about hitting the skill limit burst across his vision. The boy froze, completely stumped, like his brain just hit a brick wall. So the student couldn't wrap his head around it. Why did Mion-il agree to that duel when the strength gap was right there for everyone to see? He probably snapped at all those wild rumors about the civilian student, Huion, like that was the last straw. Mion-il, the future sword of wisdom, always moved like a master, steady, careful, and never reckless. But the comparison to that civilian hit him like a punch, shaking him to the core. He had a deep, burning love for his mentor, Zhonghua. And the moment he poured all his focus into Huion, Mion-il's confidence crumbled like dust. Wooden swords slammed together in the air, sparks flying with every clash. The duel was blazing at full power. Before Huion could even blink, a system window detonated across his vision, warning that the limit of available skills had been blown past. The boy staggered back, screaming at the top of his lungs. He stumbled and slammed face first into the arena. The weapon ripped free and shot out of his hands like it had a mind of its own. Mion-il let out an arrogant sigh, smugly deciding the commoner didn't even know the basics. Huion stepped to his feet in a hurry, grinning as he joked about that sneaky, lazy donkey flip move. But inside, panic slammed into him. A brand new menu slammed onto his screen, daring him to either buy a slot or swap out a skill. Every single coin was already gone, spent before you could even blink. Nothing worth buying was left with him, so he had to face the next move with empty hands. His eyes shot wide the second that wild guess hit him. Myeon-il didn't even let him breathe. One more vicious strike smashed Huion backward. Rage boiled in the boy's chest because he couldn't read his own limits. He'd planned to smash the enemy using a pile of weak, low-level skills. No choice remained. He yanked off the flimsy, agile step. And then he finally armed himself with a jaw-dropping, expensive 7th-rank skill. Swift step. Huion softly touched down. His body shot up, feeling feather-light, like gravity had let go. Myeon-il slammed into the fray again, roaring for round 2. Huion clenched the sword even harder and decided to throw himself into full-speed combat right away. One blink, and Huion vanished into thin air. Myeon-il lunged, but all he hit was empty air. The enemy had somehow disappeared without a trace. Myeon-il spun around in pure shock, eyes wide as everything around him hit like a wave. Huion planted himself miles behind everyone else, watching from the shadows. Up on that balcony, the students were completely stunned, like they couldn't even process what just happened. They concluded the younger one had just charged ahead, panicked, and messed up. Myeon-il broke out in cold sweat, eyes wide in disbelief, because the speed was just plain unreal. He had to face it. He couldn't even keep track of his opponent's moves. Huion bravely wiped his nose like he owned the moment. He clocked that tense look on his own face. Steel screeched, and swords slammed together with a brutal, thunderous crack. Myeon-il screamed that he'd been holding back his full power. Huion just burst into laughter, daring you to try and match his true pace. A brutal punch slammed into them, whipping them flying to the sides. Myeon-il suddenly realized he wasn't just waiting, he was being tested. Huion slipped through a storm of attacks so effortlessly that the opponent's confidence shattered on the spot. Myeon-il clenched his teeth, swearing he could still take on even that kind of speed. He dropped in from above and smashed them with a devastating blow. He figured last time was just pure confusion from that sudden gut-punch acceleration. He reminded himself, he wasn't just any fighter. He was an inner disciple of the mighty Udon sect. This rookie didn't stand a chance against him. Right in front of him, a blade flashed and nearly blinded his eyes. That snapped the mentor's words back into his memory, like they'd just been spoken. With Zhenghwa's gentle smile still burned into his mind, Myeon-il swore to himself, no way, no how, he'd never let a civilian beat him. With fresh fire in his veins, he slammed into his opponent with a brutal barrage of heavy punches. And his eyes bulged with fresh terror, Huion shot even faster. Huion roared with fury, blasting his own words at maximum speed straight back into his face. He poured his entire heart into that final attack. A dazzling burst from the strike tore through the air like lightning. Myeon's breath caught as the direct hit landed hard. And up on the balcony, the spectators stared in stunned silence. His body slammed hard onto the arena's stone floor with a brutal thud. The elders snapped the fight to a halt on the spot and announced that the winner was the civilian student, Huion. The winner let out a shaky, defeated breath. In his head, he ripped into his opponent. That wasn't maximum speed, that was pure miracle magic. So he just lied. With his energy drained, Huion tipped his head to the heavens and muttered, "Well, sorry." He tried to cover his dirty move by claiming adults never play fair anyway. The very next morning, the sun blazed over the Udon sect's breathtaking pavilions. Chonhua stared the disciple down, then demanded to know how he pulled it off. Huion scratched the back of his head with total innocence, then shrugged and said, "I guess I just turned out stronger." His mentor studied him in silence, while the boy nervously whistled through his nerves, refusing to meet his eyes. Manhwa let out a heavy sigh, cut off the conversation, and shifted the focus, asking what plans were next. The victory rumor ripped through the whole sect, and now even the elders had no choice but to face the fact that his skills were real. Still, the mentor shot him a warning. Being an official lay disciple wasn't locked in yet, and he'd have to earn it before the Council of Elders. Huion grinned with full confidence and said he'd show them, not just martial arts, but also how sharp his business brain really was. Manhwa realized this would take forever, but the disciple just burst into laughter anyway. With a sly squint, he smirked and claimed he'd only need to borrow the Udon sect's name for a little while. The boy beamed and clapped hard, buzzing with excitement as he lined up the next move in his plan.